Here's a tighter, more vivid rewrite with clean pacing and clear stakes. Today is their 10th birthday. Today, luck decides their future. They will contract their first beast. The ceremony master stands at the altar, broad-shouldered in the temple's pale light. His companion, a silver rank level 2, hums with a faint argent glow. It had only evolved after reaching the 5th rank, a feat most never see. He strikes his staff once. The sound rolls through the ancient hall. The ceremony of 10 years begins. Your beast will draw out the mana poisoning your bodies and keep you alive, he says, voice heavy with tradition. Remember, your beast's rank decides your place. Iron for the low, bronze for the workers, silver for the privileged. He does not name the higher ranks. He doesn't need to. Gold begins at 7th rank. Only 5 families in the city hold gold rank beasts. The king alone has a platinum companion, the only 10th rank. A red egg waits on the altar. Its owner steps into the circle. The shell cracks. Light blooms. A crimson salamander, the ceremony master calls as Ron Blackfire's egg bursts into flame. From the ash steps a scarlet hatchling, scales like lit coals. Gasps turn to cheers. The salamander opens its mouth and spits a perfect fire sphere that hovers over Ron's palm. Iron at birth, but promising. With the right path, it will reach bronze. With proper cultivation, it could push into silver. A door, wide open. Ron is already smiling. With his family's techniques, silver is almost certain. Even fresh from the shell, the salamander floods him with strength and the trick of conjuring fire. Next, the ceremony master says. Ren's heart stumbles. His turn. Metal floods his tongue as he sets a gray egg on the stone. Around him, other shells glow bright blue, fierce green, deep red. Most are guaranteed bronze at maturity. The priciest boast evolution to silver level 3. Only his is gray. It barely pulses. The heartbeat is so thin he has to hold his breath to feel it. This cheap egg, bought after his parents sold the last thing they could, will choose his life. Not white, not black, not brown, gray, the color of failure. Laughter and congratulations for Ron still hang in the air as Rin steps forward. His egg looks smaller after the salamander's spectacle. He runs the odds again, clinging to scraps of hope. There's a 5% chance of a marsh frog. Not dazzling, but with the right method it can reach high bronze, even a mature level 2. Unlikely. He knows the math. He will probably get the common plant. Even that will be fine. Iron at birth. With work and the secret technique, some have pushed it to bronze level 2. It would take every coin he earns and twice the effort of others. But he could live. He could repay his parents a little. The egg has 3 outcomes. People call it the failure's egg, not because it usually gives a weak plant. They call it that because of the 3rd choice. First, the plant of the poor, 94.99%. Second, the frog of the lucky poor, 5%. Third, the 0.01% no one wants. A spore, the weakest creature on record. It cannot even fully mature within iron. In other eggs, the 0.01% is a miracle, something with silver or gold potential. Here it is a sentence. Look at the failure's egg, Klein Goldcrest sneers. But it can't even manage a frog. Children laugh. Rin keeps his eyes on the shell. He refuses to give them his fear. Silence, the ceremony master thunders. This is the moment you stop being children and become tamers. Rin closes his eyes. His gray egg rests beneath his shaking fingers, its pulse a ghost. The first sunbeam cuts through stained glass. If only he could say his egg flare bright. It doesn't. It emits a weak glow, dim enough that others squint to see if it is there at all. Please, he prays, anything but the spore. The egg cracks. No flames like Ron's. No petals of light like the blue egg that birthed a water horse earlier. Just a dry snap. A twig underfoot. From a seam drifts a small cloud of gray. The laughter starts before the creature fully forms. A spore. The weakest beast in recorded summoning. So meager it barely counts as iron. Silence. The ceremony master says again, amusement tugging at his voice. Rin Patender, extend your hand. Let your companion enter you for the first time. It will clear the excess mana. The spore cloud floats to Ren's palm. It has no weight, no heat, no surge of bond between tamer and beast. It just hangs there, gray, useless. The 0.01%, someone whispers. He really drew it. Ren lifts his chin and steps down from the altar. His parents sold everything for this day. They worked 2 shifts for this egg. He will not cry for them. He will not cry for anyone. Ren kept his chin up as he left the altar. His parents had sold everything for this day. They had taken double shifts. He would not let these kids see him cry. The contract sealed with a flicker so faint it barely lit his wrist. 10% to physical strength. That was it. For a thin boy like him, it meant one more small bucket of water, a few extra minutes in the fields. Around him, other children woke to power. Element control. Huge boosts to speed and endurance. Even healing. Every beast granted something. That was the law of the bond. Ron snarled as crimson scales crawled up his forearms. Nails hardened into red claws. Canines lengthened. Gold light touched his pupils. The salamander had not only given him fire and a 40% strength boost. His body was already adapting. Endurance, speed, reflexes up by 20%, and each evolution would double those gains. By Silver 2, Ron would be 3 times stronger than a normal person, with full body enhancements and fire at his fingertips. Even a simple plant, the outcome Ren had prayed for, would have given 20% to vitality and 10% to all stats, rising toward 30 or 40 with proper methods. But the spore, pathetic, someone muttered. The only beast with no real base power. Just that miserable 10%. Protocol forced Ron to stay and watch. A wind eagle that sharpened reflexes. An earth bear that doubled resistance. A mystic fox that heightened every sense. Then the last summoner stepped forward. Luna Starweaver. Blue hair falling like water as she set a black egg on the stone. One of the most expensive. The temple held its breath. A crack like lightning. A shadow wolf slipped free, eyes old as the night. Power wrapped Luna. Speed multiplied. Senses honed. The gift to wield multiple elements. 500%. 1,000 was not impossible with that line. Gold potential. The ceremony master breathed. Extraordinary. Less than 1%, even for a high-grade black egg. Ren watched the wolf bow and the bond lift Luna above almost everyone in the city. Changes rippled through the hall. Children laughed and cried and shook as mana poisoning bled away into euphoria and strength. The eagle boy's skin traced with silver. The fox girl's senses bloomed, reddish marks flaring on her cheeks. Each transformation was distinct. Each screamed status. Except Ren's. His spore would mark him as lowest. At least, he thought dryly, it cannot get worse. He was wrong. His turn came. The spore simply dissolved into his skin without a spark. Nothing. Then small bioluminescent mushrooms pushed through his hair, tiny glowing caps among the strands. Laughter hit like a slap. Look, he's rotting. Hey, Patender, are those mushrooms or little? Silence, the ceremony master called, but the jeers kept coming. Careful, it spreads. Don't stand too close. You'll sprout fungus. The master cleared his throat, trying to salvage the moment. The spore can mature with time. It may reach 50 centimeters and grant a 20% strength increase. More laughter. Everyone knew how that story went. Years of resources for an outcome anyone else got on day one. Some children sneezed theatrically as they passed him, feigning fear of infection. Claws, marks, elemental auras everywhere he looked. Run had glowing mushrooms. Luna changed last. Her pact etched silver filigree across her skin. Her eyes took on a cold light. Her blue hair moved as if underwater. The air around her felt heavier, like pressure before a storm. Speed up by 100, all physicals up by 50, plus the breadth of elemental magic. The mushrooms on Ren's head dimmed, as if they could feel shame. In 1 week, the ceremony master announced, formal education begins. Carriages will collect you, as contracted. You will remain at school until maturity, 8 years, then take a short rest before military service. He paused. Keep your beasts fused. It is a sign of respect for the bond you forged today. The ceremony ended. Ren waited until he reached the temple steps. Away from the stairs, the whispers, the pity dressed as kindness. Only then did he close his eyes and push the spore out. The glow in his hair died away. A small gray mote drifted back to hover at his shoulder. Respect could wait. Tradition could wait. 30 years of his parents' work. The house sold. 1,000,000 crystals saved by living small. All of it wrecked by his draw. The walk home had never felt longer. Every step reminded him of what he was not, of futures burned away by that dull gray light. The spore floated beside him, almost invisible in the evening haze. His companion, his mark of failure, his fate.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
The path home had never felt so long. The cobblestone streets of the city center gradually gave way to dirt roads. Elegant buildings transformed into increasingly humble houses until he reached the outskirts, where his small cabin stood, tilted and worn by time. Correction, wasn't even theirs anymore. His poor parents now had to rent what had once been their property. He stopped at the door. The aroma escaping through the door's cracks made Ren's stomach growl traitorously. His parents were talented cooks. It was what had kept them afloat all these years. Despite their low rank, with their mature iron rank plants, the lowest possible, they've been incredibly lucky to work in the city's most modest kitchens. Sure, the owner was a great person for not discriminating against them, but their skill was undeniable. That was the real reason they were accepted there. The smell of sweet root stew, Ren's favorite, mingled with freshly baked bread. He stood there, hand on the doorknob, the spore floating pathetically beside him. Through the window, he could see his mother moving through the kitchen with the grace of years of experience, while his father decorated the table with the only 3 candles they had left. They had prepared a celebration feast with the little they had. When he finally pushed the door open, the lump in his throat was so big he could barely breathe. Ren! His mother turned slightly before his father. They both looked at the small gray spore, and Ren could see the exact moment hope abandoned their eyes. Still, his mother wiped her hands on her apron and opened her arms. My little Tamer. The tears Ren had held back for hours finally began to fall. I'm sorry, he whispered as he entered, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, my child. His mother wrapped him in her arms. It's not your fault. It will never be your fault. You spent everything, sold everything, and His father approached, his steps heavy from a long day's exhaustion in the kitchens. He knelt before Ren, placing his large hands on the boy's small shoulders. Son, look at me. Ren looked up, his vision blurry with tears. Remember when I burned an entire batch of bread last year? Ren nodded, confused. And remember what we did? We cut it into cubes and turned it into croutons. Exactly, his father smiled. Sometimes life doesn't give you what you expect, but that doesn't mean you can't make something good with what you have. But the spore, it's part of you now, his mother added. And we love every part of you. Hey, his father joined the embrace, his voice hoarse. You're our son. It doesn't matter if you have a spore or a dragon. But it did matter. Of course it mattered. The dining room was small, but filled with love and the aroma of the outskirts' finest cooking. But try as he might, he couldn't enjoy it. His parents had prepared everything they could in their new situation. Sweet root stew, freshly baked bread. They'd even managed to get some wild berries for dessert. The 3 candles illuminated the table with a warm glow, so different from the spore's gray radiance. Eat a little, darling. His mother served a generous plate. You've had a long day. I'm not hungry. Just one bite, his father insisted. Your mother spent hours cooking, but not even the aroma of his favorite dish could overcome the bitter taste of disappointment. Ren rose from the table, tears returning to his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered before running to his room. the spore following him like a gray shadow of guilt. "Run," his mother called. "At least take some bread." But the only response was the sound of a door closing. In the dining room, the 3 candles continued burning, illuminating a table full of food prepared with love and hope. His parents exchanged glances, the weight of worry visible on their tired faces. The afternoon's attempts bore no fruit either. "I'm not hungry," he shouted when his mother knocked on the door with a tray of food. In the darkness of his room, the boy observed the weak flickers of his pathetic companion. 1 week. In 1 week, he would have to face school, the mockery, the contempt. 1 week to accept that his life would be exactly what everyone expected from someone with the worst possible beast. A gray life. In the small dining room, the candles illuminated the exhausted faces of 2 people who had just watched their last hopes turn into gray spores, and the school contract lay on the table. It was mandatory. Once signed, he had to attend the School of Cultivation and Evolution for 8 years. There he would learn to strengthen his creature, develop its abilities, become a true tamer. In one of the best schools, if not the best. That was the idea, but 60 years, the father murmured, both of them already 60 years old. Their mature, iron-rank plants barely glowed at their wrists and gave them hair composed of leaves and vines, the result of a life of limited cultivation. Their hands, weathered by decades working in kitchens, trembled. "We sold everything for this. Everything." His fingers moved over the document they had signed this morning. The one that had cost them over 1 million crystals. The one they'd worked their entire lives for. In their youth, they hadn't had the resources to buy the secret techniques needed to evolve their beasts beyond the basic state. A simple 40% increase in vitality and 20% to all attributes was all they got from them. But being mature plants allowed them to pretend they were Bronze 1, barely enough status to keep their jobs in the third-rate kitchens on the city's outer line. Luckily, the vitality bonus made them look and feel younger, like a couple in their 40s. Today, however, nothing in their life felt like luck. "We sold everything for this," whispered the mother, tears falling on her worn apron. "Everything so he could have a real chance at a good school. So his plant could grow to bronze, evolve, give him a better life than ours." The school was expensive for a reason. 8 years of intensive training, access to cultivation techniques, resources for evolution, connections, everything necessary to transform a common beast into something more. They had dreamed of something better for Run, a rank that would let him walk the main streets without lowering his head. With a normal plant, Run would have had the chance to reach bronze rank 2, improve his vitality to 80% upon maturation, and all his base increases to 40%. Maybe even get a job in the city's good kitchens learning from his parents. But with a spore, he can't back out now. The mother clutched the contract in her trembling hands, silent tears running down her cheeks. The payment is made, and the laws are clear. Every contract must be fulfilled, and every child with a beast must complete their basic education since they passed that law last year. If only I hadn't gotten sick, we could have had enough. I was so close to buying the brown egg. But that cursed expensive medicine, I should have D. Don't say that. It's not your fault. Rin wouldn't have wanted that, the mother admonished. Besides, maybe choosing the best and most expensive school was too greedy on our part. What have we done? They had dreamed of something better for Run. But with a spore, 8 years. The father sank into his chair. 8 years watching others evolve their beasts while our foolish investment takes away his hope for. He didn't need to finish the sentence. A spore couldn't evolve its rank. There were no cultivation techniques to study, no improvement paths to explore, no secret techniques to buy. Many had already tried. Richer people with much more support. The only one who succeeded was labeled as the worst failure. A fortune spent for an almost useless gain, 20% strength. Since that day, the spore has been the symbol of failure. Rin would spend 8 years learning things he could never apply, his surroundings a constant reminder of what he couldn't achieve. 8 years of mockery, being the school's laughingstock. 8 wasted years, because what could he learn about cultivation and evolution with a creature that couldn't even evolve? Sadness led the father to reminisce about the past, a past that Run had illuminated. "Remember that day?" he asked suddenly, his gaze lost in the candle flames. "When I couldn't find the medicine demanded by the kingdom because it was depleted due to severe mana contamination from that year's hoard, and I had to go out searching for a mana poisoning cure and also found that plant you ate? We thought we had been blessed." She nodded, taking his hand. How could she forget? They had been trying to have a child since their 20s. Almost 3 decades of broken hopes, watching their friends form families while they remained alone. They had lived a frugal life, pooling their resources to form a happy family, interested only in one thing they couldn't obtain no matter how much they accumulated. Almost 1 million, an incredible amount for citizens of their rank. They thought about using the money to cure their infertility, but they were already so old. They had given up. But that trip to the outskirts, the plant I found in the outskirts, mistaking it for that high-quality, 100-year-old sweet root. He continued, "When you ate it, I thought I had killed you. You were so pale, so cold. And a week later, I felt like I was 20 again," she smiled sadly. "And the following year, we succeeded without trying. Our miracle." They fell silent, listening to the muffled sobs coming from Ren's room. Their little miracle, the child who had given them so much life and happiness when they had almost lost hope, now faced a cruel destiny. "It's as if the dragon gods were mocking us," she murmured. "They gave us a child when we were already too old, only to watch him suffer," he completed, squeezing her hand. The candles, almost spent, continued burning, their flames reflecting on the school contract on the table. In the adjacent room, their 10-year-old son cried silently, a small gray spore floating beside his pillow like a constant reminder of his fate. The feast they had prepared with so much love slowly cooled on the table, untouched, while 2 elderly parents wept for the cruel turn their life's miracle had taken. Ren lay on his bed, tears drying on his cheeks, while rage gradually replaced sadness. The spore floated nearby, its weak gray glow only serving to enrage him more. Go to school like this? It was a cruel joke. He could already see the next 8 years unfolding before him like an endless nightmare. While other children would learn to evolve their beasts, to awaken new powers, he would sit there with a creature that couldn't even mature properly. Maybe it would be better to do what other unfortunate, rotting ones did, and... No, he couldn't. He loved his parents, and they loved him too much too. He needed to find something to distract himself. He turned to the small bookshelf beside his bed, where he kept his favorite book, worn from countless readings. The second contract of the Wandering King. His fingers traced the worn cover, following the image of a legendary warrior who had achieved the impossible. According to the story, the hero had found a mystical medicine deep in the forest, something that had allowed him to form a second contract with a beast. It was just a tale, of course, in all recorded history. Only the current king and a dozen legendary warriors had managed to obtain a second creature contracted, and none of them would reveal the way to achieve it to the masses. But Ren was still a child, still naive. Ren looked through his window toward the dark forest stretching beyond the outskirts. The medicine from the story. What if? But the thought died as quickly as it arose. His father, with his mature iron rank plant, had returned half-dead the only time he ventured there. And he had real advantages. A great 40% extra vitality, an adult's strength and speed increased by 20%, along with all his other attributes, a modest control over plants that allowed him to detect dangers and defend against some monsters, plus years of experience. And what did Ren have? A useless spore and a miserable 10% increase to his childish strength. He couldn't even lift the heavier flour sacks in the kitchen. How did he expect to survive in a forest full of monsters? The spore flickered weakly, as if sensing his desperation. "Why you?" he whispered bitterly toward the creature. "With such low chances, why did it have to be you?" Silence was his only answer. In the dining room, he could hear his parents talking in low voices, their voices laden with worry. He couldn't bear it anymore. He couldn't be the cause of their pain, the pathetic end to all their hopes and sacrifices. But he couldn't change anything either. Once the contract was formed, it was for life. The spore would be his companion until the day he died, a constant reminder of his failure. Unless his eyes fixed again on the dark forest beyond his window. Even considering it was suicidal, the mana poisoning would kill him in less than 3 days with such a weak creature in his body. But as he thought about the school contract, about the years of torment awaiting him, what was worse, dying while trying to change his destiny, or living 8 years as the school's laughingstock? His parents, maybe he could make them happy too. Ren opened his worn book once more, his fingers tracing the illustrations of the dragons. It was believed that all creatures could become dragons by finding the right path of cultivation. According to the book, the Wandering King found much information alongside his medicine. It wasn't just any medicine he wanted, it was in the heart of dragon territory, where mana flowed so densely it could be seen in the air. Ren opened his worn book once more, his fingers tracing the illustrations of the dragons. According to the book, the Wandering King had found lots of information alongside his medicine. It wasn't just any medicine that Ren wanted, it was in the heart of dragon territory, where mana flowed so densely it could be seen in the air. The Wandering King had traveled for months, crossing the lands of each dragon lord. The red dragon, whose scales burned like the desert sun, ruled over all fire beasts and reptiles. Under his domain, even tiny lizards could breathe flames. The blue dragon reigned in the ocean depths with his majestic fins and gleaming horns, where every marine creature swore loyalty. The green dragon, covered by a thick layer of vegetation, was lord of the deep forests, where every beast and plant danced to his will. In the eternal skies, the white dragon commanded all flying creatures, while the black dragon governed the beasts of night and shadow. The book showed a particularly detailed illustration of the articulated dragon, whose domains were filled with giant insects and creatures with exoskeletons. Each evolutionary line, each egg color, was represented by a dragon. Scholars denied the correlation between dragons and egg colors due to variations diverging from logical branches in egg outcomes. But that wasn't relevant knowledge for the child. Ren paused at a page that had always intrigued him. The dragon of decay, lord of fungi, spores, and all creatures that fed on decomposition. Reigning above, feeding and creating all creatures of his evolutionary line. At least dragons respect their subjects, he murmured bitterly, looking at his pathetic spore. Unlike humans, but the dragons and their territories were far from the human city, and for good reason. Humans had chosen to settle in this area precisely because the mana was so scarce that great beasts found it repulsive. They had no interest in it. For humans, this was their only protection. Only the weakest creatures, expelled and rejected by the stronger ones, prowled near the city. In the plains. But it was very rare they had to be injured, dying, to dare leave the forest. Without mana, hunger would catch them and they would die soon. The mana here, in human territory, wasn't nearly sufficient, and yet they were deadly dangerous, maddened by the hunger that mana scarcity provoked in them. Like wild animals seeking their next meal, they attacked anything that moved. Ren shuddered, remembering the stories his father told about the forest outskirts. How the beasts there had an empty, desperate look. How they ignored their own wounds, driven only by hunger and lack of mana. Even herbivorous creatures turned aggressive, attacking any source of mana they could find. But that was just the outskirts. In dragon territories, mana would be Ren's worst enemy. With a beast of this level, he could barely enter the first iron circle with the lowest-ranked beasts. Fortunately, the ruin his father found was right at the beginning of the bronze ring, and he could enter through the middle of the iron ring. Something like that could be possible even for him, right? Sure, he wanted to go to dragon territory and find a miracle like obtaining 2 beasts. However, he would have to settle for medicine that could expel his spore from his body or something similar. Something like that could be close to the medicine that cured his mother. Dragon territory, or even the silver ring, were out of consideration. If he ventured too deep, the mana would consume you quickly, and Ren slammed the book shut, his heart pounding. Would he really go to that forest? Even thinking about it was madness. With his useless spore, mana might not be a problem, as he probably wouldn't survive even his first encounter with the beast. But while listening to his parents' muffled sobs through the wall, what other choice did he have? As night fell, determination had awakened more than courage and run. His stomach growled. The aroma of sweet root stew still floated in the air, more tempting than ever as his hunger had returned now that he had a clear purpose. He slipped out of his room like a shadow, the spore floating silently behind him. The floorboards creaked treacherously under his feet, but years of sneaking out to steal midnight snacks had taught him where to step. In the kitchen, the feast his parents had prepared remained untouched. Ren wrapped large portions of bread with stew in clean cloths, also packing several wild berries. His father always said berries help keep the mind clear when fatigue struck. From the tool cabinet, he took his father's smallest kitchen knife, the one used for delicate work, and a worn canteen. Rope and his father's most precious map. He hesitated a moment before also taking the flint for starting fires. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. A noise in the hallway made his heart stop. Footsteps. He snuck back to his room and got into his bed just as the door opened. "Run," his mother's soft voice. "Darling," Ren dove under the covers, grateful for the darkness hiding the packed bag under his bed. The spores settled on his pillow, its wheat gray glow perfectly matching the moment. "I'm so sorry, my love," whispered his mother, sitting on the edge of the bed. Her hand, rough from years of work, but always gentle, stroked his hair. "If we could have gotten you a better egg." "It's not your fault, Mom, or Dad's," replied Ren. And for the first time in hours, he wasn't faking the emotion in his voice. It was just bad luck. "Would you like some stew? It's still warm." "Tomorrow," promised Ren, hating the lie, but knowing it was necessary for his mission. "Thank you for cooking it." She leaned down, kissed his forehead, and the familiar aroma of spices and love almost broke his resolve. "Almost. I love you, little one." "I love you too, Mom." The door closed softly. Ren waited, counting his heartbeats, until the footsteps retreated and the house fell silent. With movements practiced during his afternoon escapes with friends, he tied the rope. His bedroom window overlooked the back garden, a drop of barely 2 meters. The spore watched silently as he secured the rope to his bedpost. "If you're going to follow me on this journey," he whispered to his companion while shouldering his backpack, "you'd better at least not get in my way." The night was clear, illuminated by nearly a dozen moons. From his window, he could see the dark forest beyond the city limits. Somewhere out there lay his only hope for a different future. He took the rope in his trembling hands. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I'm sorry, Dad." And he began his descent. Ren landed softly in the back garden, where his parents' mature iron ring plants maintained an herb and food garden. Though it wasn't theirs anymore, they could still use it to pay part of the house rent and cover some basic food for the family. Beyond the garden's wooden fence, just a few meters away, the terrain began to descend. The view of enormous plains lay almost completely hidden by darkness. There were no walls to climb, no guards to evade. Their house was one of the last structures before the civilized world dissolved into no man's land. Only some plantations dared exceed the common cultivation zone, those with enough for guards. But with this house so close to the external zone of the abyss, nobody wanted to invest in lands that could be invaded by hordes of cursed monsters if the army ever faltered. Being in the front line was frightening. But Ren didn't understand why they were so cowardly. In his 10 years of life, and according to his parents in another 30, the hordes had never overcome the army. These empty plains were perfect for cultivation, in his opinion. Not that it affected him anymore. He pulled out his father's worn map, tracing with his fingers the lines and annotations he knew by heart. How many times had he heard the story? His father, desperate to find medicine for mana poisoning, unable to get it in the market due to that year's shortage. He had been forced to venture in a monster domain like many others. Many didn't return that year, and his father almost suffered the same sad fate. The mandatory mission that had nearly cost him his life. And just when I thought it was my end, his father always said at this part, "I found it." A hidden entrance, as if the earth itself had cracked open to save me. I thought I had fallen into a night excavator's hole, but it was an ancient tunnel, probably from the era before Mana's expansion. The map showed the path with obsessive detail, every mark, every turn, every landmark carefully noted. His father never knew why he'd been so meticulous in documenting a route he swore never to take again, but Rin suspected part of him always knew it would be needed someday. An hour later, Rin finally stood at the forest's edge. He'd been lucky not to encounter any exiled and hungry creatures. It seemed the day's bad luck had finally run out. Rin glanced at his spore. The spore floated beside him while its faint glow contrasted with the dark forest. Here at the boundary, it was strangely peaceful. Healthy monsters never ventured so close to the mana void zone. Only the hordes did that, and on specific dates, following underground routes the humans had learned to predict and attack to contain and keep them from leaving the abyss. Here there weren't those kinds of problems. In theory, whispered Ron, more to give himself courage than to inform his silent companion. We should be safe until we reach the deep iron forest. Monsters, even iron rank ones, hate this zone almost as much as dragons do. Rin repeated to convince himself. He unfolded the map one last time, memorizing the first stage. If his father had found that underground tunnel, if it really existed, it would be his best chance. The monsters wouldn't detect him there, and he could advance much deeper into dangerous territory before having to face the real dangers. He turned to look back toward his faraway house one last time. They were probably still awake, worried about him, planning how to make his life more bearable in the coming years. I'm sorry, he murmured, but I can't accept that future. Not without trying to change it at least once. And with that, he took his first step toward the forest. The spore floated behind him, its weak gray glow barely visible under the light of the 12 moons. The journey that could change his life had just begun. 3 kilometers had never seemed so long. Rin kept to the exact boundary where the earth was still poor enough in mana to keep most beasts away, but not the moon toads. The glowing trees betrayed the change in mana density. His father had specifically warned him about these creatures. No larger than a rabbit, these blue-skinned, translucent amphibians were almost invisible under moonlight, except for their eyes. 3 bioluminescent eyes that glowed with a hypnotic radiance, capable of paralyzing their prey with just a direct look. They weren't particularly strong, barely immature iron-rank beasts, but their hunting method was terrifying. They moved in small groups, surrounding their paralyzed prey, before beginning to secrete an acid that... Rin shook his head. He didn't want to remember that part of his father's stories. Or worse still, the night excavators. Slow but enormous beasts, the size of a cow, that dug complex burrows under the mana-poor earth. Mature iron-rank beasts. Their long arms, ending in massive claws, could split a man in half. And though they were lazy and generally solitary, their territories were full of natural traps, hidden holes that led directly to their jaws. Both creatures depended on traps to complement the poor mana in their environment. The spore floated calmly beside him while Rin tested each step carefully. The ground here was treacherous. A network of excavator tunnels could collapse under his weight at any moment. The huge dead tree had to be close. His father had drawn it in detail on the map, an ancient oak, twisted like a claw emerging from the earth, marking the entrance to the secret tunnel. If he could reach it, a bluish flash caught his attention from the corner of his eye. Had that been? No, he mustn't look directly. If they were moon toads, a direct look would be his end. Another blue flash, closer this time. Rin kept his eyes fixed on the ground, his heart hammering against his chest. Moon toads always hunted in groups of 3 to 5. If he'd seen one, a soft, melodious croak came from his left, then another from the right. They were surrounding him. Don't look at their eyes. Don't look at their eyes, he murmured to himself, repeating the words his father had etched into his memory. Moon toads were slow, clumsy even. If he could keep his composure and keep moving, the ground creaked beneath his foot. Rin froze. That hadn't been the sound of an amphibian. That had been the unmistakable groan of earth giving way over a night excavator's tunnel. He was trapped between 2 deadly threats. If he retreated, the toads would catch him. If he advanced, he would fall into an excavator's den. And he couldn't stay still. The toads were already. A blue flash appeared right in front of him. So close he could see the details of its translucent skin, the pulse of internal organs glowing with bioluminescence. Ren closed his eyes instinctively, but it was too late. For a fraction of a second, he had seen the toad's 3 hypnotic eyes. His muscles began to go numb. The melodious croaking intensified, now coming from all directions. He could hear the soft padding of their feet approaching, the wet sound of their skin secreting acid. Ren closed his eyes instinctively, but it was too late. For a fraction of a second, he had seen the toad's 3 hypnotic eyes. His muscles began to go numb. The melodious croaking intensified, now coming from all directions. He could hear the soft padding of their feet approaching, the wet sound of their skin secreting acid. The paralysis was spreading through his limbs when the spore, without warning, fused with his body. Ren wanted to scream in frustration. Now's not the time to be stubborn. A miserable strength increase won't help me here. The weak glow of the mushrooms in his hair would only serve to attract more predators, making him a more visible target in the night. The moon toads were getting closer. He could hear the rhythmic padding of their feet, the wet sound of their skin secreting acid. The acrid smell already reached his nose, like rotting fruit and hot metal. But something was strange. The toad in front of him, the one that had paralyzed him, tilted its head. Its 3 eyes blinked in an erratic sequence, breaking the hypnotic pattern. The melodious croaking turned to discordant, confused notes. The mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed with bioluminescence similar to the toad's, creating patterns that mimicked the glow of their internal organs. It was as if his head had become a distorted version of his predators. The leader toad jumped forward, its 3 eyes now fixed on the glowing mushrooms. The confusion broke its concentration, and with it, the paralyzing spell. Ren felt control of his body return just as the ground beneath the toad began to give way. Everything happened in an instant. The toad, disoriented by the luminescent mushrooms, didn't notice it had landed on the edge of an excavator tunnel. The earth crumbled beneath its weight with an ominous crunch. Its bright eyes widened in surprise as it fell, its melodious croak transforming into a shriek of panic. A deep roar rose from the tunnel's darkness, followed by the unmistakable sound of jaws snapping shut. The other moon toads froze, their bioluminescent patterns becoming erratic with fear. The acid smell intensified, an involuntary defensive reaction. Ren didn't stop to think. His legs, newly freed from paralysis, moved by instinct. A jump to the right, away from the formerly invisible tunnel edge, he could now see thanks to the freshly collapsed earth. The tunnels, he gasped as he ran. They form a pattern. Night excavators were methodical, territorial. Their tunnels always followed the same design, a main entrance with traps in a semicircle around it. If the toad had fallen into one, another crunch to his left confirmed his theory. 2 of the remaining toads, in their rush to chase him, had jumped directly onto another weak section. The earth opened beneath them like a hungry mouth. More roars from the depths, more abruptly interrupted shrieks. The last moon toad, perhaps wiser than its companions, disappeared into the night with a terrified croak. Ren stopped, panting, his heart threatening to burst. The mushrooms in his hair still pulsed weakly, but now they seemed more like a reminder of his luck than a curse. You, he whispered to his spore, still fused with it, are still the weakest beast that exists. But, thanks, I guess. A distant crunch reminded him this was no time to celebrate. Somewhere beneath his feet, a night excavator had just enjoyed an unexpected dinner of moon toads. And he didn't want to be dessert. The dead tree. He had to find a dead tree before. A deep roar made the earth tremble beneath his feet. It was just an excavator. He reassured himself they wouldn't come out. But the noise attracted something else. A new sound froze Ren's blood, a metallic hiss, like blades dragging against stone. The underground roars quieted, as if trying to go unnoticed. The new sound came from the deep forest toward the bronze ring, where darkness was densest. Rin hid behind a tree. A mirror mantis emerged between the trees, its body covered in reflective plates that fragmented the moonlight. It was huge, horse-sized, but something was wrong with it. Its plates, which should form a perfect pattern, were cracked and misaligned. Deep scars furrowed its exoskeleton, and one of its main sides was broken near the tip. Rin's heart stopped. There shouldn't be a creature like this within 20 kilometers. Mirror mantises were creatures of the deep forest, bronze-rank beasts that would normally never approach a zone so poor in mana. Their bodies were designed to absorb and reflect the dense magical energy of their territory, using their reflective plates to disorient prey with light and mana illusions. This one had been expelled from its territory, probably after losing a territorial battle. The wounds had weakened it so much it couldn't even maintain its natural habitat. And a wounded beast, hungry, forced to hunt in poor lands, was 1,000 times more dangerous than any local predator. The mantis turned its triangular head toward him. Its eye facets, normally a kaleidoscope of iridescent colors, were dull with hunger. The plates on its body tried to reflect the moonlight, but the pattern was erratic, sickly. Instead of the usual hypnotic illusions, it produced only desperate flashes. "Don't look at me! Don't look at me!" Rin silently pleaded, remembering the basic lessons about beasts that every child learned. Mirror mantises usually hunted by creating illusory duplicates of their prey, confusing them until they stumbled over their own reflections. But this one, in its famished state, a stray flash created a small reflection beside the tree and illuminated Rin. The creature moved. Despite its wounds, its speed was terrifying. The scythes, even the broken one, cut the air with a deadly whistle. No games, no illusions. Just pure, desperate hunger. Rin ran. The dead tree had to be close. His father had mentioned that the twisted roots pointed north, that the bark marked by ancient lightning formed an arrow-like pattern. Behind him, the metallic hiss drew closer. The mantis couldn't maintain that speed for long in a zone so poor in mana, but it didn't need to. It only needed to catch him once. A scythe plunged into the ground beside him, so close he felt the displaced air cut his cheek. The mantis's broken plates tinkled like broken bells, its breathing a tortured hiss of hunger and desperation. And then Rin saw it, the dead tree, its twisted silhouette cut against the night sky. But the mirror mantis was getting closer, and the sound of its broken plates was like a promise of death. Rin saw it, the dead tree, its twisted silhouette cut against the night sky. The mirror mantis was getting closer, and the sound of its broken plates was like a promise of death. The dead tree was less than 50 meters away when the ground gave way beneath Rin's feet. Hope had got him distracted. For one terrible moment, Rin floated in darkness, his stomach lurching as gravity claimed its prey. His father's kitchen knife flew from his belt. In an act of pure instinct, Rin grabbed it. The blade plunged into the tunnel wall, slowing his fall with strength he didn't know he had. Earth and stones rained around him, striking his face, getting in his eyes. Above, the mirror mantis stopped at the hole's edge. Its broken plates created a sickly kaleidoscope of fragmented moons. The creature tilted its triangular head, calculating, hungry. No, no, no. Rin kicked at the wall, searching for a foothold. The knife was slipping. The earth gave way and Rin fell. The mantis jumped. Its sides gleamed in the darkness as it fell, the metal of its broken exoskeleton singing a death song. Rin saw his life flash before his eyes, 10 short years that would end in darkness, far from his parents, without even the chance to. A deafening roar shook the tunnel. The image of the excavator catching him made him drive the knife back in, and in his desperation, he saw a small tunnel beside him. The parallel tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for Rin to crawl through. Without thinking, Rin pushed himself toward the tunnel. But the mantis caught up. However, just before it could grab Rin as he entered the tunnel, the wall beneath the mantis opened, revealing the monstrous head of a night excavator. The beast had been hibernating, storing what little mana was available when the collapse had awakened it, and now was hungry. The mirror mantis twisted in the air, its sides finding excavator flesh instead of its original prey. The excavator roared in pain, its massive claws emerging from the earth to catch its attacker. Rin was paralyzed with terror. Less than 2 meters away, two nightmare beasts fought in a deadly dance of metal and earth. The mantis's broken plates created chaotic flashes in the darkness while the excavator tried to drag its prey into the depths. To his right, almost invisible in the darkness, Rin distinguished an opening. An older tunnel, its walls smoothed by the passage of time. He had no choice. The winner would be decided soon. He crawled into the tunnel, while behind him the battle reached its climax. The mantis's metallic shriek mixed with the excavator's roar. There was a horrible crunch, and then silence. Rin crawled away from the edge, his breathing so loud in his ears he feared the winning beast might hear him. "I'm alive," he thought, incredulous. The mushrooms in his hair provided the only light in the tunnel's absolute darkness, their weak glow barely sufficient to see his own trembling hands. "Please let the excavator have one. Please let the excavator have one," Rin muttered while crawling as fast as he could. Night excavators were territorial and slow. If it won the battle, it would take its time devouring its prey before considering pursuing him. But if the mantis won, a victorious shriek made his blood freeze. It wasn't the deep roar he'd hoped to hear. No, no, no. The mushrooms in his hair barely illuminated the path when a fork appeared before him. The left tunnel was irregular, clearly the work of some beast. But the right one, Rin stopped, panting. The walls were too smooth, too perfect, exactly as his father had described in his stories. As if someone had melted the stone itself, son. A tunnel of the ancients, from when humans lived here and shaped rock with magic. Behind him, the wet sound of flesh being torn made him nauseous. The mantis was feeding, but one meal was all it needed to recover strength and continue hunting. Rin entered the ancient tunnel, now in a much more spacious place. The mushrooms in his hair revealed marks on the walls, symbols he couldn't understand, but that were definitely not natural. This had to be the path his father had found. The tunnel seemed to stretch eternally into darkness. Rin had maintained a quick pace for what felt like hours, driven by fear and adrenaline. But now his legs trembled from the effort, and his breathing was heavy. He stopped, leaning against the smooth wall of the ancient tunnel. Remembering what his father said about berries helping recover energy and maintaining a clear mind, he ate some of the ones he'd brought. He thought about lighting a torch with a flint, but he'd forgotten to collect wood, and his mushrooms provided enough light. With a clearer mind, he began to analyze his situation. According to his father's map, he should have found the exit by now. Had he taken a wrong turn? Chosen the wrong tunnel? The mushrooms in his hair provided light in the absolute darkness, but their glow was barely enough to see a few meters ahead, though they were better than a torch. They'd save him too. Rin had been cursing them since he'd invoked them, but now, "At least you're good for something," he murmured to the spore, still fused with him, even if just as a lamp. He let himself drop to the ground, his legs grateful for the rest. The water from his canteen was lukewarm, but had never tasted better. While catching his breath, he studied the mysterious symbols on the walls. Some seemed to respond weakly to his mushroom's light, as if they recognized something in their faint glow. "I suppose I should thank you for the thing with the toads, too," he continued, surprising himself by talking to the world's weakest creature. Though it was pure luck, you probably didn't even know what you were. A distant echo interrupted his words. The unmistakable sound of metal against stone, followed by that blood-freezing, hungry hiss. The mantis had finished feeding, and this time there would be no more excavators to distract it. This time he would be alone, and now it was coming for him. No, no, no. Rin jumped up when the metallic hiss resonated in the distance, but closer. The mushrooms in his hair now pulsed with a strange yellowish glow, but he barely had time to wonder why. The tunnel stretched before him like a black throat. There were no side exits, no places to hide. No, no, no. Rin jumped up when the metallic hiss echoed closer. The mushrooms in his hair now pulsed with a strange yellowish glow, but he barely had time to wonder why. The tunnel stretched before him like a black throat. No side exits, no places to hide. Just smooth, ancient stone and those mysterious symbols that seemed to glow faintly under his mushroom's yellow light. Come on, Rin urged himself. The metallic hiss drew closer. He could hear the sides scraping against the tunnel walls, the sickly tinkling of broken plates. Another hiss closer. The mantis moved faster now, the excavator's flesh providing it with new energy. The jingling of its damaged exoskeleton was like a death bell approaching in the darkness. Rin ran. His feet struck the ancient floor as he plunged deeper into the tunnel. The air grew colder, denser. His breathing echoed in his ears, mixing with the ever-closer sound of scythes against stone. Scryich, scryich, scryich. The mantis didn't even need to run. Its steady, relentless pace was enough. Sooner or later, the tunnel would end. Sooner or later, he'd run out of places to flee. A flash of its size illuminated the tunnel behind him. The beast was close enough now that the mushroom's light revealed the sickly gleam of its eye facets, the irregular pattern of its broken plates. It didn't matter that it was injured. It didn't matter that it had been expelled from its territory. It was still a bronze-rank creature, and he was just a child with the world's weakest beast. The tunnel began to narrow, or maybe his eyes were playing tricks in the darkness. The yellow light from the mushrooms cast strange shadows on the walls, making the ancient symbols seem to dance. Scryich, scryich, scryich. Closer, ever closer. Rin stumbled, his knees striking stone. Pain exploded in his leg, but terror kept him moving. He rose and kept running, limping, crawling forward. The mantis hissed, the sound now, so close he could feel the vibration in his bones. Its broken plates created a nightmare spectacle on the tunnel walls, reflecting the mushroom's yellow light in fractal, demented patterns. And then, the tunnel ended. A smooth, solid wall rose before him, covered in ancient symbols that seemed to mock his fate. No way out. The metallic hiss stopped. In the silence that followed, Rin could hear the sides scraping against stone as the mantis approached slowly, savoring the moment. It no longer needed to run, no longer needed to hurry. Its prey was cornered. It only had to. The mushroom's yellow light intensified, as if responding to Ren's terror. The symbols on the wall began to glow with the same sickly hue, peeling off the walls in small clouds, creating patterns that reminded him of spores. The mirror mantis stopped. Its eye facets reflected the yellow light, creating a kaleidoscope of death on the tunnel walls. It raised its size, preparing for the final blow. But something was wrong. The beast tilted its triangular head, confused. Its broken plates tinkled with a new rhythm, more erratic, more frightened. The air grew dense, heavy with a smell Run had never experienced before. It was like damp earth and rusted metal, like rotting leaves and something older, deeper. The symbols on the wall, which he'd thought were marks of the ancients, began to move. No, not move. They were detaching. They're not symbols, whispered Run, the horror of realization hitting him like an icy fist. They're spores, dormant spores. The mantis took a step back, its metallic hiss transforming into something close to panic. Its plates now reflected thousands of points of yellow light detaching from the walls, ceiling, floor, spores that had been waiting for centuries, awakening to the resonance of the mushrooms in Ren's hair. The entire tunnel was alive, and it was hungry. The ancient spores swirled in the air like a golden storm, enveloping the mantis first. The beast shrieked, a sound Ren never imagined such a fearsome creature could make. Its broken plates, reflecting light imperfectly, created a horror show as the spores found every crack, every fissure in its exoskeleton. Ren pressed himself against the back inclined wall, his heart beating so hard he thought it would burst. The mantis writhed, its sides cutting the air uselessly while the golden cloud consumed it. Its metallic shriek faded, transforming into a wet, terrible sound. And then silence. Where the powerful bronze beast had stood, now lay only a mound of broken plates covered in yellowish mold that pulsed with ancient life. The spores turned toward Ren. The golden cloud swirled like a wave of ancient hunger. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed frantically, but this time there was no confusion. There was no salvation. The ancestral spores weren't normal predators. They were vestiges of a forgotten age, and everything living was their prey. The first contact was like frozen fire on his skin. Yellowish fungi sprouted from his arms, legs, neck, each pulsing with a sickly rhythm that drained his energy. The pain was indescribable, as if every pore in his body was being devoured from within. "No, please!" He gasped, falling to his knees. But then he saw it, where the spores had detached from the ceiling. A ray of light filtered through like a promise of salvation. An exit, barely large enough for a child to pass through. Ren stood up, his legs trembling with effort. The invasive fungi kept spreading across his body, but something was different. Where the mantis had succumbed in seconds, he remained conscious. His own spore, the world's weakest beast, pulsed with its light as if it were fighting. Every effort was agony. He pushed himself upward, his fingers finding the hole's edge just as his knees threatened to give way. The light blinded him momentarily as he crawled out of the tunnel. It wasn't the outside. Where the mantis had succumbed in seconds, Ren remained conscious. His own spore, the world's weakest beast, pulsed with light as if it were fighting. Every effort was agony. He pushed himself upward, his fingers finding the hole's edge just as his knees threatened to give way. The light blinded him momentarily as he crawled out of the tunnel. It wasn't the outside. He emerged into a small, natural cave, its walls covered in bioluminescent crystals that bathed everything in an ethereal, spectral blue light. But he could barely appreciate the chamber's beauty. The ancestral fungi continued spreading, consuming his vital energy. "Please," he whispered, his vision blurring. "I don't want to die here." His spore fought valiantly, its own mushrooms creating barriers against the yellow infection, but it was losing the battle. Ren could feel his consciousness fading, his body growing colder by the second. That's when he saw it. In the cave's center, bathed in crystal light, grew a plant that seemed like it reminded him of the one on his father's stories. The plant, he mumbled, crawling toward it as the yellow fungi continued their spread. The one that helped mother. His fingers brushed the luminous stem just as darkness began claiming the edges of his vision. With trembling hands, Ren pulled the glowing plant free. The yellow fungi still expanded across his body, but something in his mind, something deeper than conscious thought, told him this was important. This plant was, though he didn't fully understand. His father had found one like it almost 12 years ago in another tunnel. The miracle medicine that had allowed his mother to conceive. But this one was different. Where his father's plant had been firm and robust, this one was delicate and ethereal. This was the female. His father had found the male. With the ancestral fungi consuming his last strength, Ren brought the plant to his lips. The taste was like liquid light, like remembering a dream. And then he felt it, a deep resonance with something already existing in his body, dormant genes inherited from his mother, the echo of the other half of the medicine that had made his existence possible. The two halves of an ancient medicine, separated by years and tunnels, finally reunited in his blood. The effect was instantaneous. Pure white light emanated from his skin, so intense that the yellow fungi recoiled, withering and falling like ash. His spore, that supposedly useless creature, began pulsing with a new rhythm, perfectly synchronized with the energy now flowing through his veins. To any observer, the spore would have appeared exactly the same, small, apparently weak. But Ren could feel that something had fundamentally changed within, as if it had evolved into a completely new variant, one that no one had ever seen before. Warren didn't know. What he couldn't know was that he had just completed an ancient recipe, a medicine that required 3 specific ingredients: the male plant, the female plant, and something unique, a host born with the first half of the formula. He himself was the missing key. The mushrooms in his hair returned to their usual color, giving the impression that nothing had changed. But in the depths of his being, a dormant power had just awakened, a power that would change everything. Hunger awakened him first, a ravenous void that made his hands tremble as he pulled the bread with stew from his backpack. He ate desperately, savoring each bite as if it were the first food he'd ever tasted. The mushrooms in his hair shone with a stronger light than before, illuminating the cave crystals with dancing shadows. Rin noticed, but he'd survived too many horrors that night to worry about such a small change. As he chewed the last piece of bread, the reality of what he'd done began to hit him. He'd been seconds from death, multiple times. If the moon toads had caught him, if the excavator had found him, if the mantis, if the spores, his parents, what would have become of them if he? I should go back, he murmured, guilt weighing heavier than exhaustion. This was madness. Return. The voice was so soft at first he thought it was his own mind. But there was something different about it, something ancient and wise that resonated deep within his being. And then it began. As if someone had opened a floodgate in his mind, knowledge began to flow. He saw his spore, not as the weak creature everyone despised, but as something with infinite potential. He understood, with crystal clarity, every step necessary for its cultivation. The exact way to feed it different types of fungi, the precise cultivation to strengthen the bond, the correct sequence of evolutions, the bifurcations in its path to power. But it didn't stop there. The mirror mantis, he saw how its plates formed, how it channeled light and mana, the weak points in its exoskeleton where cracks always began. Its life cycle, the night excavators, the way they built their tunnels, the patterns they followed, how they conserved energy during times of scarcity. The moon toads, the mechanism behind their hypnotic eyes, the exact composition of their acid, the mating rituals that determined their hunting patterns. The ecology and biology of the creatures he'd encountered became clear to him now. It was as if he could see the invisible threads connecting all creatures, understand their most intimate natures, their strengths, their weaknesses, their secrets. What is this? He whispered, overwhelmed by the avalanche of information. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly, and for the first time since obtaining his spore, Rin felt he could see the path before him. Not just his own, all creatures' paths. The information in his mind was clear but limited, like a map showing only the beginning of a much longer journey. Rin could see the first steps of his spore's cultivation with perfect clarity. The specific types of fungi needed, the exact conditions for growth, the strengthening rituals. There was something he could take from the tunnel for the final step of his cultivation. But the other parts needed for its cultivation? None of that was anywhere near here. The first fungi I need, he murmured, processing the information, grow in the swamp zones north of the rival city. Not in this forest. The revelation hit him with both frustration and relief. However, something else gleamed at the edges of this new knowledge, a promise. When his spore reached bronze rank, a possibility would open that made his heart beat faster. A second contract. A second beast. The rest was nebulous, like looking through murky water. But the certainty was there. Each evolution of his spore would not only strengthen it, but also expand his understanding of beasts and their paths. I have to go back, he said aloud, this time with determination rather than fear or regret. I have to get a lot of stuff and start cultivating from the beginning. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly, as if nodding. It was time to return home. His parents would be worried sick if he arrived too late. And now he had a real plan. Not a desperate search, but a clear path. Although first, he'd have to find a way out of this cave. The mana density in this cave was insane. Rin would be poisoned if he didn't get out soon. How there could be so much mana in a place in the bronze ring was a mystery to him, even with his expanded knowledge. He wanted to take some of the enormous mana crystals from the cave, but none were loose. It was a great joint formation, as if it were someone's work from the past, rather than something natural. Since it was impossible to break the incredibly hard formations, perhaps he could return to try another time. A mana crystal became much more resistant the larger it grew. He needs something really powerful to extract it. Much more than a pick. Even the bronze rank mantis probably couldn't have broken it. Decided to retreat, Rin observed the tunnel through which he'd arrived. The ancestral spores were still there, dancing in the darkness with their sickly golden glow. But now he saw them differently, understood their nature with astonishing clarity. "They're not aggressive by nature," he murmured, processing the knowledge flowing in his mind. "They attack because they're hungry after centuries of hibernation. But their true method is—" He stopped, an idea forming. The ancestral spores, like all fungi, followed basic behavioral patterns. They sought nutrients, yes, but more importantly, they responded to specific chemical signals. Or took some mud. And if I combine this with a yellowish mold formed where the ancestral spores fell, as if analyzing its composition, Rin closed his eyes, concentrating. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed, releasing gray spores that mixed with his sweat. It was disgusting, but now he understood the purpose of the information pulsing in his head. The spores from his own beast contained chemical markers that identified him as part of the colony. He smeared the mixture on his exposed skin full of spores. "The ancestral spores should recognize me as another fungal colony now," he murmured, "and should keep them at sufficient distance, too." Rin knelt beside the mirror mantis's remains. Under the broken plates and yellowish mold, he could see what he was looking for, the crystalline core, a structure of the beast that acted as their power center. It was the size of his fist. "Beast cores," he whispered, the knowledge unfolding in his mind, "are like concentrated eggs. They contain all the creature's genetic information, its mana patterns, its essence. And there's a way to revive them." He took some of the mantis's plates, those he could carry in his backpack, and the golden fungus from the ancestral spores that had formed while consuming the mantis. He stepped toward the tunnel. The golden spores swirled around him, but didn't attack. To them, he was now just another fungal organism of the same species, not prey. "It works," he whispered, amazed by his own knowledge. "It really works." While carefully advancing through the tunnel, Rin couldn't help but smile. A few hours ago, he'd been convinced his spore was useless. Now, that same weakest monster had given him a knowledge to survive where a bronze-rank beast had perished. And the core in his hands. Anyone else would see it as a mere trophy. But Rin could see its true value, an option to obtain the mirror mantis. A creature that, someday, he might need. The ancestral spores tunnel ended up being the easiest stretch of the return journey. Rin emerged covered in mud and a mixture of gray and some stray golden spores, but alive and with a valuable treasure in his backpack. He first cleaned the excess mud and golden spores carefully. Now, facing the return path, everything looked different. Where before there was terror and uncertainty, now there was understanding. The night excavator tunnels weren't a random maze as he'd thought. They always dig in spirals, he murmured to himself, recognizing the patterns in the ceiling. And they marked their active territories with deeper scratches on the eastern walls. Thanks to this, he could avoid zones where other excavators might be active while looking for a less steep trap to exit through. Emerging into the moon toad zone, he stopped to listen. The melodious croaking came from the distance, but now he understood its meaning. 3 ascending tones, they're hunting. For descending tones would be mating, he whispered. And they always leave one toad watching escape routes while the others chase prey. He waited patiently until the croaking pattern changed, indicating the toads had moved away following some nocturnal prey's trail. Only then did he move, keeping to areas where the ground was more compacted. Moon toads hate hard, dry earth. The knowledge flowed naturally now. Their feet are designed for soft terrain where they can bury themselves quickly. On firm ground, their bodies lose moisture. Even the natural trap zones were obvious now. The excavators always left small signs, stones arranged in certain ways, patterns in soil erosion. To untrained eyes, they seemed like coincidences, but to Rin now they were like warning signs glowing in the night. The mushrooms in his hair, still shining with that more intense yellowish tone than before, lit his path as he advanced with renewed confidence. They showed the pattern of the frog's eyes. Rin was no longer worried about being betrayed by their light. Now, they even served as camouflage. Every step was calculated, every decision informed by knowledge that just hours ago he didn't even know existed. "It's as if I've been blind my whole life," he thought while skillfully avoiding a zone that showed clear signs of toad activity. And now I can finally see. The night that had begun as a desperate struggle to survive had become a practical lesson about the true nature of beasts. And his supposed curse, the weakest spore, turned out to be the key to understanding all these secrets. The magical forests finally appear before him, the last magical trees glowing from frog urine against the night sky. Rin stopped a moment, unconsciously touching the mantis core in his pack. He had set out seeking a second beast, a miracle to change his destiny. What he'd found was something far more valuable: understanding. The edge of the common forest was near. Rin could see in the distance, about 5 kilometers away, the first houses of the outskirts, small lights flickering in the darkness like fallen stars. Soon he would have to face the consequences of his actions. He paused for a moment, adjusting the backpack where he kept his obtained treasures. How would he explain all this? The scratches, the mud, the golden fungus, the plates, the core? Perhaps he could slip in through his window and... A movement in the darkness made him freeze. For a moment, he thought they were frogs expelled from their territory. Dangerous, as so hungry and lacking mana, they would act differently than normal. But 2 silhouettes moved near the forest's edge, one carrying a dim lamp. Even at this distance, he recognized the way they moved, not monsters but his parents. His father led the way, hoe in one hand and his mature plant ready for combat. His mother followed close behind, her own vines subtly spreading across the ground, prepared for defense. Of course, it would have obviously revealed his path and pointed the exact way he'd gone. The map. As soon as they realized Rin wasn't in his room, his father would have noticed the map's absence immediately. How many times had he seen Rin studying it, asking details about that desperate adventure in search of medicine? It was obvious where a child who had just received the weakest spore would look for hope. Rin watched them move in the darkness. Despite their basic beasts, they moved with the coordination that only years of working together could give. He had seen them like this before, in the kitchen, working in perfect synchronization. But now, his new knowledge let him see more of it. How his father's plant extended in specific ways to detect movement. How his mother's vines created precise defensive patterns with the surrounding roots. Even with only mature iron rank beasts, they had developed effective techniques. The mushrooms in his hair glowed more intensely. He was tired, covered in mud and gray spores, but alive. And now he would have to face what was coming. He had no choice. He took a step toward the light. Just one. The yellowish glow of the mushrooms in his hair betrayed him. "There," his father whispered. A frog so close to the prairie could have attacked Rin. The vines moved with surprising speed, and Rin felt the familiar grip of his mother's plants wrapping around him. For a moment, he considered explaining how mature iron-rang vines had a growth pattern that... Rin! His mother's cry cut through his thoughts. The vines loosened instantly. Rin prepared for the worst. He now knew the biology of dozens of beasts, understood the most complex behavioral patterns, but had no idea how to handle what was coming. The punishment would be severe, he knew. He had stolen his father's precious map, had run away in the middle of the night, had... His mother reached him first, practically knocking him over with the force of her embrace. His father arrived a second later, enveloping them both in his arms. They were crying? "My child," his mother sobbed, squeezing him so tight he could barely breathe. "My little one, we thought..." His father couldn't finish the sentence, his voice breaking. Rin stood rigid, waiting. At any moment the shouting would begin, the scolding, the punishment he deserved for being so reckless. He knew he deserved it. He had acted without thinking, had... "I'm so sorry," his mother whispered through tears. "If we had chosen to get you a better egg instead of a better school, even if you couldn't cultivate it properly, we shouldn't have risked your future like this," his father added, his voice trembling. "We shouldn't have believed you would get the same plants as us with such certainty. Why got sick we should have." Rin blinked, confused. Were they blaming themselves? "But he tried to explain. "I was the one who ran away. Who stole the map? Who?" His father hugged him tighter. "We drove you to this. With our expectations, with our..." No. Rin pulled back enough to look at them. You sold everything for me, even the house. Worked so hard to give me a place in the best school, to give me an egg, any egg, and tears began falling down his cheeks, mixing with the mud and remaining gray spores. I just wanted, his voice broke, wanted you to be proud. We always have been, his mother whispered, gently cleaning his dirty face. Always. There was no shouting that night. No punishments or severe scolding. Just 3 people embracing under the light of the 12 moons, crying together while the mushrooms in Ren's hair glowed softly like fallen stars. And for the first time since the invocation ceremony, Ren understood something that no knowledge about beasts could have taught him. His parents' love was stronger than any disappointment, deeper than any failure. It was unconditional. The walk back across the prairies was silent, interrupted only by his mother's small, contained sobs as she held his hand, as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. At home, the feast they had prepared to celebrate his invocation was still on the table, now cold. His mother immediately began reheating it. It's not necessary, Ren began, but she was already in the kitchen. You must be hungry, she insisted, wiping away tears while she worked. You've been outside in the night so long. To his own surprise, when the aroma of reheated stew filled the room, his stomach growled fiercely. He ate as if he hadn't tasted food in days, each bite awakening a deeper hunger. His body seemed to cry out for energy, as if the transformation had awakened a voracious appetite. I'm so sorry, son. His father broke the silence, his voice breaking. If we weren't so poor, if we had worked harder, if we could have gotten you a better egg, we shouldn't have pressured you so much with our own worry, his mother added, serving another plate of stew that Ren immediately attacked. You must have felt so. If something had happened to you, his father interrupted, couldn't, the sorrow would have. Don't pressure him with emotional blackmail, his mother scolded his father. Can't you see he's suffered enough? Being alone in the forest so long, hiding from frogs in the mud. She approached Ren, stroking his dirty hair tenderly. Would you like a hot bath, darling? Forgive me. His father covered his face with his hands. I'm useless. I couldn't even get you a decent beast. But I promise, I'll go to the forest myself. I'll find a miracle medicine, something to replace that spore or to give you a second beast like in the legends. Anything for you, son. Don't misunderstand me. I love you even if you only have that fungus, but for you No. The vehemence in Ren's voice surprised everyone, even himself. He stood from the table, fresh tears in his eyes. Please don't say that. Don't apologize. I was foolish. His voice trembled, but was full of conviction. This fungus, your gift, is the best gift in the world. I was stupid not to see it before. No. The vehemence in Ren's voice surprised everyone, even himself. He stood from the table, fresh tears in his eyes. Please don't say that. Don't apologize. I was foolish. His voice trembled, but was full of conviction. That egg, this fungus, your gift, is the best gift in the world. I was stupid not to see it before. He bowed deeply to his parents, tears falling to the floor. Forgive me for not thanking you properly. For all your sacrifices, for everything you've done for me. I will triumph at school and make you proud. I promise. The mushrooms in his hair glowed softly, as if nodding to his words. We already are, his mother whispered, lifting him up and embracing him. We always have been. His father joined the embrace. And for a moment, under the light of the 9 moons filtering through the window, the small family remained united, stronger than ever. Ren smiled through his tears. He had much to tell them, much to explain. But for now, this was enough. He was home. In the bathtub, while hot water washed away the mud and spores from his skin, Ren reflected on his new knowledge. The mushrooms in his hair glowed softly, reflecting in the water like tiny stars. His parents' plants. Now he could clearly see what had happened. The knowledge flowed in his mind like a perfectly detailed manual. Basic plant development. 1. Iron rank. Provide 100 correct development points to rise in rank. 2. If 1,000 points accumulate without specific direction, premature maturation. 3. Result: weak seedling intermediate maturation, only path available in iron rank. His parents hadn't had a choice. Without knowledge of evolution routes, without resources to buy proper cultivation techniques in their youth, their plants had accumulated development points randomly until reaching the limit. Once they reached 1,000 points, maturation was inevitable. Unrealized potential paths. Bronze rank. Bronze 1, common seedling. Bronze 2, strong seedling. Silver rank. Silver 1, weak plant. Silver 2, common plant. Silver 3, strong plant. The water cooled while Run reviewed this information. It was fascinating and tragic at once. His parents had worked so hard, but without the correct knowledge, without understanding the evolution paths. Rin straightened in the bathtub. There were no paths left, but there was an option. The knowledge unfolded in his mind, clear and precise. 1,000 days method, true plant maturation. The mature plants, everyone knew, were actually an intermediate state, a cocoon waiting to bloom. The true final result required 1 to 1,000 specific development points. 2. 1 point per day, without exception. 3. A 3-part ritual that must be performed with absolute precision. The method was deceptively simple. 1. At dawn, the plant must absorb the energy of a common mana crystal drop, confine some on the surface after rains, until it completely dissolves. But it must be processed. This energy must mix with a drop of vital essence. 2. During midday, the crystal needs exactly 24 minutes of direct sunlight. Not a minute more, not a minute less. 3. At sunset, finally, the mixture must be sealed with golden pollen from night flowers, common plants that bloom in 10-day cycles. It's like daily medicine, Rin thought enthusiastically. And the components are common enough to never run out. The key wasn't in the components, but in precision and consistency. 1 failed day, and the process had to restart from zero. Most people who had tried any cultivation with a new method would abandon it after a few months, convinced it wasn't working. Additionally, at the end they had to seal all the accumulated power in the process with an expensive rune. In this case, his parents would need a vitality rune for the last day. Now I understand why nobody discovers this, murmured Run. Everyone knows effective cultivation methods last 150 days maximum. Some extend to 6 months, but the 5-month perception was also a misinterpretation. In reality, all methods were only 100 days long, but people wasted time at the beginning trying to find the correct rhythm and getting the mana energy levels wrong. Not that he didn't get why they used less mana every day than the most efficient amount. Mana poisoning was scary. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly while he processed this information. It was strange to know so much, every beast. Yet even if he could clearly see the evolution paths and cultivation methods, up to silver rank, beyond that, nothing. Everything related to gold rank beasts or higher was an absolute mystery. Perhaps, he thought, when my own spore evolves. But that was a problem for another time. Now he had to find a way to convince his parents to try something that everyone knew was impossible. 1,000 days, a daily mission, 3 magical elements, no margin for error. And the result, a truly mature, iron plant could reach the strength of a bronze 2 plant. It wouldn't be as versatile as a plant that had naturally evolved to that rank, but its base power would be the same. Their extra vitality would rise from 40% to 100%, and they would live longer too. He just needed to convince them to try it. For 1,000 days. It's like cooking, he murmured, finding an analogy his parents would understand. You can have the best ingredients, but without the correct recipe. He sank deeper into the water, watching how the mushrooms in his reflection subtly changed color. There had to be a way to show them he wasn't making up stories, to show them he really understood things no 10-year-old should know. But first, he needed to better understand his own powers. Information about other beasts flowed naturally in his mind, but there were limits. Nebulous frontiers where knowledge faded into uncertainty. 1 step at a time, he whispered, remembering how his father always said that same thing when preparing a particularly complex dish. Water dripped from the mushrooms in his hair when he finally left the bath. In the foggy old mirror, his reflection stared back. A small, scrawny boy with red hair and green eyes, luminescent mushrooms in his hair. Nobody would believe that this child could be special. He would have to prove it. Ren awoke with the first light, the mushrooms in his hair glowing faintly. In 6 days, he would leave for school for 8 long years. But before leaving, he needed to make sure his parents began the ritual. He found them in the kitchen, preparing for another day of work. Their faces still showed marks from the previous night's crying. "Mom, Dad," he called their attention, holding dozens of mana crystals he had found over the years in the garden. "Before I go to school, could you promise me something?" Ren awoke with the first light of dawn, the mushrooms in his hair glowing with a faint radiance. He had dreamed of evolution routes and paths of power, but among all that knowledge, one simple idea had crystallized. His parents were cooks. He dressed quickly and went down to the kitchen. As expected, his parents were already there, preparing the day's bread. "Dad," he called softly, "can I ask you something about cooking?" His father turned, surprised. Ren had never shown much interest in the technical details of cooking, and though he always helped, he didn't do it to learn. "When you make bread," Ren continued, "why do you let the dough rest for exactly 12 hours? Well, his father smiled, always happy to share his knowledge with his son. "That's the time natural yeast needs to." "And if someone told you that you only need 2 hours?" His father frowned. "It wouldn't work the same. Fermentation needs." "How do you know?" "Because I've tried it. All bakers have tried it. We look for shortcuts at first, but with time you learn that some processes simply need their time." Rin smiled. "And if someone told you you're wasting your time? That 12 hours is too much, that nobody waits that long." Then his father crossed his arms. "I'd show them 2 loaves, one with 2 hours of rest and one with 12. The proof is in the result. Even if everyone says you're crazy for waiting so long." A spark of understanding appeared in his father's eyes. "This isn't about bread, is it?" "Mom, Dad," Rin called their attention, holding hundreds of small mana crystals he had collected over the years. "Before I go to school, could you promise me something?" Mana crystals this small weren't very valuable. You needed about 5 to buy a decent loaf of bread. But Rin was offering them around 500, about $50 before you feel the need to ask, a rather significant amount for a child. His parents exchanged glances. The kind of glances adults share when a child is about to say something that will break their hearts. I found a way to make your plants stronger," Rin continued, trying to sound confident despite the lump in his throat. "It's a ritual that takes 1,000 days, but I promise," Rin said firmly, "that if you trust me and follow exactly what I tell you for 1,000 days, your plants will reach the power of a bronze rank 2 beast." "Son," his father began skeptically, "like bread, Dad. The proof will be in the result." "Oh, darling." His mother knelt before him, her eyes moistening again. "I know it sounds impossible," Rin continued quickly, "but you only need to absorb this each day, with these mana crystals and—" He understood what they were thinking. Their little son, desperately trying to convince himself and them that everything would be all right, that his weak fungus and their mature plants didn't mean a future of misery. "Please," he whispered, just promise me you'll try it. For 1,000 days. His father wiped tears with the back of his hand. "Son, even if you don't believe me, even if you think it's foolish, just do it. Please." His parents looked at each other again, this time with a mixture of pain and love so deep that Rin felt his heart breaking. "Of course we'll do it." His mother hugged him, her voice trembling. "Every day, without fail. 1,000 days." His father nodded, joining the embrace. "We promise." His father looked at one mana crystal, then at his plant. "What do we need to do?" Rin knew they were just playing along, that they thought this was his way of coping with the trauma of having the weakest beast, of having to leave for school, where he would be mocked for years. But they had promised to try. They never had broken a promise with him. And for now, that was enough. The last 6 days had passed in a blur of detailed instructions and practices on how to process the crystal. His parents followed each step with a dedication that broke Ren's heart, not because they believed it would work, but because they couldn't bear to see the hope in their son's eyes fade. Now, Ren had 2 years to get them 2 vitality runes. He would have to pay about 20,000 crystals or find a way to. He would see how to achieve it. If the school was as they said, maybe it wouldn't be so difficult, or maybe it would. Now, while packing his last belongings, Ren mentally reviewed the requirements for his own spore's evolution. The components were significantly more demanding than the mana crystals and pollen his parents needed. Fortunately, the Imperial Academy of Cultivation and Evolution wasn't just any school. It was one of the city's 3 most prestigious institutions, if not the most prestigious, with extensive laboratories, thousands of specialized cultivation techniques, and, according to rumors, even ancient ruins on its grounds. "Do you have everything ready?" his mother asked from the door, holding a food package she had prepared for his journey. Ren nodded, unconsciously touching the mantis core that was next to the plates and golden fungus in his bag. They hadn't believed how he obtained these things, though they pretended to. How could they believe something like that? The mushrooms in his hair glowed softly as he hugged his parents one last time. In a year, when he returned, their plants would have completed almost a third of the ritual. And in less than 3 years, though they didn't believe it possible now, they would reach a power that would change their lives. He couldn't wait to return for the second time and give them their runes as a gift. "Remember, don't miss a single day," were his last words before boarding the carriage that would carry the new students. As the wheels began to turn, Ren took a deep breath. The coming years would be difficult. Being the child with the weakest beast at one of the most prestigious academies wouldn't be easy. But he had a plan. He had knowledge that no one else possessed. And most importantly, he had something to prove. The carriage moved away from the outskirts, heading toward the heart of the city, where the Imperial Academy's spires rose like spears against the morning sky. It was time for the boy with the useless fungus to begin his true path to power. As the carriage pulled away, Ren couldn't help worrying about his parents. Though they wouldn't tell him, Ren's new knowledge had shown him subtle details in their bodies and invocations that were beginning to show signs of mana poisoning. His father particularly, that's why he had fallen ill, living in the outskirts for so many years. That poor house didn't have a great location, but its land wasn't small at all. They had sold it for about 500,000 crystals. The house they'd sold to pay for his education they would now have to rent, and with their mature iron rank plants, they would barely earn enough in the kitchens to keep themselves fed. At 60 years old, they were already close to normal life expectancy. Only the base vitality of their plants granted them guaranteed an additional 30 years, a precious gift, but not enough in Ren's eyes. If they complete the ritual, he murmured, if their plants reach Bronze 2 power, they wouldn't just gain more strength and better job opportunities. The increased vitality would give them several additional decades of life. It would cure his father. Ren would see his parents only once a year if he managed to gather money for the trip. About 100 crystals should be easy to get, or so he thought. What wouldn't be easy would be getting the runes and materials necessary for his own evolution. But it didn't matter. Ren wanted to excel in school and make them proud, maybe even become wealthy and buy them a house in the city. He knew his parents deserved it more than anyone, but everything in its time. He would have 2 years to achieve his first goal, 8 years for the second, 8 visits total before graduating, 8 opportunities to verify their progress with the ritual to ensure they followed each step correctly. In the best case, by the 3rd visit already, the carriage crossed through city streets, taking him further and further from the outskirts where his parents would begin another day of hard work, always believing they were following a meaningless ritual just to make their son happy. Ren's fingers unconsciously traced the mantis core in his bag, knowledge about his own spore flowing through his mind. But before he could contract it, he would need to turn it into an egg and evolve his fungus to bronze rank. To evolve, he would need 1. First, absorb the essence of death. Charge a bronze rank crystal with the moss that grows on discarded bodies of bronze beasts. 2. Then, mix it with venomous spores from bronze rank fungi. 3. Finally, seal the process with a mold that forms on some magical runes when they absorb too much mana. He had to absorb those expensive processed crystals for 100 days before consuming the final piece. The piece for the final day was the golden fungus in his backpack. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly, as if responding to his thoughts about cultivation. "I'll show them," whispered Run, his mushrooms glowing with determination. "I'll show them that their faith in me, even if pretended, wasn't in vain." The carriage stopped to pick up more students in the commercial district. Rin sank into his seat, conscious of the glowing mushrooms in his hair. Before, he would have expelled the spore to hopefully avoid mockery, but now, the idea of losing that constant flow of knowledge, of returning to ignorance about beasts and their secrets, was unbearable. A group of 3 children boarded, their fused beasts already granting them cool, visible changes: metallic claws, tiger markings, gleaming scales. They stopped when they saw him. "Oh, look who's here," smiled the tallest, a boy with feline features thanks to his tiger beast. "The rotting boy. Are those glowing mushrooms on your head?" The group's only girl wrinkled her nose. "Can't you at least hide them? It's disgusting." "Leave him," laughed the third, his green scales gleaming. "He probably can't even control his beast properly. Isn't that right, rotting boy? Your spore is so weak it has to cling to your head to move." Laughter filled the carriage. Rin clenched his fists, knowledge flowing through his mind. The first boy's spirit tiger would reach its limit at Bronze 1 rank, unable to evolve further due to a flaw in its core cultivation, deriving his spirit tiger into a mature, earthly tiger, instead of reaching greater spectral tiger at Silver 3. The girl's beast, a lesser fire eagle, had a defect in its mana absorption pattern that would limit its fire control and growth at Bronze 2, deriving her lesser fire eagle into a mature red eagle, instead of reaching greater sun eagle at Silver 3, and the third boy's scales. But that knowledge was useless now. It only made it more painful, seeing the defects and limitations in their beast cultivation methods, but being unable to say anything without seeming crazy. "At least my mushrooms glow," he finally said, his voice firmer than expected. "Your spirit tiger has a cultivation defect that makes its fur opaque." Silence fell in the carriage. The tiger boy looked at him with both surprise and fury. "What did you say?" "Nothing," Rin turned back to the window. "Just that maybe you should worry more about your own beast than my mushrooms." "What do you know about cultivation, rotting boy?" he growled, his feline features intensifying with anger. "Your pathetic spore doesn't even have true development, doesn't even qualify as a beast." Knowledge burned in Ren's mind, tempting him to reveal more, to explain exactly how the tiger's cultivation would affect its future evolution and show him how foolish he was. But he bit his tongue. "I'm just saying what I see," he murmured. "What you see?" The boy grabbed him by the shirt collar. "I'll show you what I see, a weakling with mushrooms on his head who needs to be taught his place." His companions laughed, forming a circle around them. The carriage had suddenly become smaller, more suffocating. "Look, he's even trembling," mocked the eagle girl. "Isn't he adorable?" Rim wasn't trembling from fear. He was trembling from frustration. He could see their beast's flaws so clearly. The irregular mana pattern in the eagle's feathers, the instability in the other boy's green scales. Useless knowledge when you're about to be beaten. "Look, he's even trembling," mocked the eagle girl. "Isn't he adorable?" Rim wasn't trembling from fear. He was trembling from frustration. He could see their beast's flaws so clearly. The irregular mana pattern in the eagle's feathers, the instability in the other boy's green scales. Useless knowledge when you're about to be beaten. But maybe there was something useful in there after all. Knowledge flowed through Ren's mind as the tiger boy maintained his grip. A spirit tiger at iron rank granted 30% strength and 10% in all other attributes. At silver 3, those numbers would multiply: 180% strength, 60% in the rest. The gap between beasts widened dramatically with each rank. But now, at iron, the difference wasn't so overwhelming. Rin himself, though thin after his latest growth spurt, had a healthy constitution thanks to good nutrition. He wasn't from a rich family, but his parents always put him first and were cooks. His 10% increase in physical strength wasn't insignificant when it came to moving his light body with ease. "What do you know about beasts?" rotting boy. The tiger boy raised his fist, his feline features accentuated by rage. Your fungus isn't even a real beast. The mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed. A spirit tiger's attack pattern always started the same way, a direct punch to the face. Ren could even understand the boy's body positioning before the attack. So he pushed up against the hand holding his shirt. When the other hand cut through the air, trying to punch where his head had been an instant before, Ren couldn't help but smile. Is that all? He mocked, his heart pounding hard. The boy with green scales, who had been watching silently, narrowed his eyes. It was just luck, Gene. He's just trying to provoke you. Can't even manage to hit the weakest one with your superior beast? Maybe mushrooms aren't so pathetic after all. A tense silence fell over the group. It wasn't just Gene who felt insulted now. Everyone who had belittled Ren for his spore looked at him with growing fury. Was the rotting boy suggesting their beasts weren't better than the miserable spore? Shut up, Gene finally roared, his wounded pride transforming into rage. I'll show you what a spirit tiger can do. Ren moved by pure reflex, recognizing the pattern once again, his lighter body responding with agility that surprised even himself. That's enough. The boy with green scales, who until then had only watched, activated his quick movement ability and put his foot behind Ren. Ren stumbled, losing his precarious balance. Ren noticed the attack patterns again, but knowledge only helped if you had time to use it. This time, there was no time to react. The fist connected with devastating force. Jin's extra 30% translated into a pure impact. Who's pathetic now? Jin growled, but his words sounded more like those of a hurt child than a real threat. The mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed weakly. All that knowledge, and still, the fist rose again. This time Jin was going to use his tiger's real ability. That could seriously hurt Ren. You're going to learn to keep your mouth shut. Fungus. The carriage door burst open, flooding the interior with bright light. The carriage had stopped, and the driver opened the door for them to get out. What's going on here? Jin's fist stopped centimeters from Ren's face. The driver warned them that fighting would cost them points if the teachers saw, but he didn't do more than that, though it was enough to prevent the worst. The group descended and the driver left, but before Ren could get away, they surrounded him again. With nowhere to escape, the tiger boy grabbed his shirt and dragged him toward a hidden side of the building. Now then, rotting boy, he smiled, his fangs gleaming. No one's going to interrupt us while we teach you something about respecting your superiors. His companions formed a circle, blocking any escape route. The mushrooms in Ren's hair flickered nervously. He would have to use his knowledge to try to get out of this. Maybe a good hit could help him escape. This Gene kid didn't have a defensive beast, so a punch would hurt him. The problem was the lizard boy. Look how his little mushrooms are trembling again, mocked the eagle girl. Are they as scared as he is? Ren wasn't trembling from fear still. He was trembling from excitement. Could he prove he wasn't so far below them? The fist rose again. I'm going to teach you why you shouldn't stick your rotting nose in. 3 against 1. The voice cut through the air like an ice knife. Luna Starweaver emerged from the shadows, her wolf materializing beside her like a nightmare made real. Her blue hair rippled with its own energy in her blue eyes. The tiger boy dropped Run as if he was too hot to touch. We were just teaching the rotting boy some manners, he muttered, backing away. Manners? Luna arched an eyebrow. 3 beasts with silver potential against the weakest of all. How pathetic. He started it, protested the eagle girl. He said things about our beasts. And that makes you feel threatened? Luna's voice was soft but sharp. A silver rank beast threatened by the weakest of all? That makes you sound more pathetic than him. The tiger boy straightened, trying to recover some dignity. It's not fair that you... That I what? Luna took a step forward. That I use my advantage against you, like you were doing a moment ago? Would you feel good if I did? The silence that followed made the hierarchy clear. Get out of here, Luna ordered. All of you. Get out. Luna ordered. All of you. This isn't over, rotting boy, Jean growled. We'll see you later. While the bullies fled from Luna, Ren gently touched the mushrooms in his hair. The knowledge they provided was worth every taunt, every threat, though that didn't make things easier. As the others hurried to obey, Luna looked at Ren for a moment. There was no sympathy in her gaze, only a kind of calculating curiosity. Or so Rin thought still. "Thank you," Rin said when the others had left, "for helping me." Luna looked at him as if he were a particularly annoying equation she needed to solve. "I didn't do it for you." Her voice was cold, practical. "I did it because I dislike those who abuse their power. 3 silver beasts against the weakest of all." She shook her head. "It's pathetic." Her shadow wolf watched her with its bright eyes, tilting its head as she continued. "You do well to stay away from trouble. And frankly, you should consider keeping your spores separate from your body. Those mushrooms on your head only make you a more visible target." "I won't." Rin's response was immediate, firm. "My spore isn't weak, and I'm going to prove it." Luna raised an eyebrow, studied him for a moment. "Interesting," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She remembered this boy from Invocation Day. How could she forget the only one with a gray egg among so many bright colors? Almost all children of rich and powerful families. Luna hadn't understood why someone who could only buy that type of egg was at this school. The terrible result was even more unexpected. He had been so visibly depressed that day, so defeated, but now there was something different about him. Not just the luminescent mushrooms in his hair, but something in his posture, in his eyes. He looked more bright, and she didn't mean the mushrooms on his head. "Delusion or courage," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Very interesting." She turned to leave, but paused for a moment. "We'll see if that confidence of yours lasts at least the first year," she said over her shoulder, her wolf vanishing into the shadows along with her. "Though I doubt it." Rin watched her disappear before he could ask what was so interesting, the mushrooms in his hair pulsing softly. But he didn't need her to believe in him. He didn't need anyone to believe. Not yet. The Imperial Academy rose before him, its towers casting long shadows over the city. The Imperial Academy's great hall was impressive. Marble columns veined with mana lines rose toward a vaulted ceiling where carved beasts seemed to move in the shadows. The new students gathered in orderly rows, their fused beasts creating a spectacle of colors and transformations. Except for Rin, of course. The mushrooms in his hair stood out like a gray stain amid so much brilliance, though he was the one who glowed, literally. "Welcome." The director's voice resonated through the hall. He was a tall, thin man with a fused gold beast, a royal phoenix whose golden feathers intertwined with his white hair. "To the most prestigious institution of beast cultivation and evolution." Rin watched fascinated. His new knowledge allowed him to see some of the phoenix's mana patterns, the complexity of its evolution, though everything related to gold-rank beast cultivation remained nebulous in his mind. Over the next 8 years, you will learn not only to strengthen your beasts, but to understand the very nature of the bond between tamer and creature. Some of you will reach silver rank. A few, very few, might go beyond. His gaze paused briefly on Luna, whose shadow wolf had gold potential, then almost imperceptibly on Rin. "However," he continued, "rank isn't everything. History is full of tamers who achieve the impossible with seemingly weak beasts. Everything depends on your dedication, your understanding, and above all, your willingness to see beyond the obvious." The whispers began immediately. Everyone knew it was a diplomatic lie, a way to console those who, like Rin, had bad luck in their invocation. Of course, to Rin, the irony of the message sounded different. "The professors will assign your dormitories and schedules. Classes begin tomorrow at first light." The director paused. "One last thing. At the Imperial Academy, we value individual progress, but also contribution to society. We don't reward direct abuse based on beast rank. Social levels depend on each other, so you'll lose points for misbehavior, but gain points for contributing. Everyone has potential. Don't waste it." This time, his gaze clearly stopped on the group that had beaten and threatened Rin in the carriage. The tiger boy shifted uncomfortably. As the students began to disperse, Rin noticed something curious. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed with a different rhythm near certain areas of the hall, as if responding to a powerful stimulus beneath the floor. Knowledge flowed through his mind. Perhaps the academy had indeed been built on ancient ruins. Ruins where He might find the runes he needed without buying them if he was lucky. All first-year students this way. A professor's voice interrupted his thoughts. It's time to assign dormitories. Rin followed the crowd, but his mind was already working. The academy held more secrets than it appeared, and he had 8 years to discover them. Room 15, Gray Wing, announced the professor, a trace of pity in her voice as she handed Rin the key. The name was a cruel euphemism. It wasn't really gray, it was where they sent students with limited potential, though even there, Rin was a special case. He was truly the bearer of a failed gray egg. They hadn't had one in decades. The dormitory was spacious but austere, designed for 4 students. His roommates were already there. Min, a thin boy with a water snake. Taro, more robust, with a digger beetle. And Lu, tall and quiet, with a night bat. All iron rank beasts, yes, but at least they had evolution potential up to bronze. Or that's what everyone believed, but Rin could see their cultivation routes up to Silver 3 like all other beasts. The Mushroom Boy. Min smiled when Rin entered. There was no malice in his voice, just a kind of resigned camaraderie. I guess it makes sense they put us together. Rin dropped his bag on the last available bed, aware of the curious glances toward the mushrooms in his hair and the bruise on his eye. Your spore, does it do anything besides glow? Asked Taro. Rin hesitated. After the incident in the carriage, he didn't want to draw more attention to himself. It gives a 10% increase to my strength, he said simply. And it has something good. I don't need lamps. More pitying looks. An uncomfortable silence followed his words. The others exchanged glances, the kind you give someone who won't accept a painful truth. Hey, Min tried to sound cheerful. It's not so bad. Lu's bat has good perception, Taro added. Not everything is about pure power. You're right, it's not so bad, Lu said from his corner. I'm a second-year student, but I failed 2 units. That's why I'm still in this dormitory. My first year here taught me that initial rank isn't everything. My bat seemed useless at first, but with the right training. While Lu shared advice about life in the Gray Wing, Rin observed his companions. He could clearly see how Min's snake needed fresh water instead of salt water in its crystals to develop its true potential, how Taro's beetle needed to be fed processed crystals during a specific moon phase to advance along the correct path and not mature. Perhaps, he thought, when they knew each other better, when they trusted each other, he could share some of his knowledge, at least enough to help them. While unpacking, the mushrooms in his hair pulsed with that strange rhythm again. There was something under the Gray Wing, something ancient. Maybe being in the worst dormitory wasn't so bad after all, especially if what he sensed was correct, and the ancient ruins extended right beneath their feet. Lu, Rin approached the second-year student after the others began organizing their things. Where can I get discarded monster parts? Cores, beast remains, materials, bronze crystals, and... Lu stopped organizing his trunk and looked at Rin with both pity and amusement. Straight to the point, huh? He sighed. Look, a few years ago, the Academy distributed resources equitably. Every student received what they needed to try evolving their beast, regardless of potential rank, to search for possible hidden cultivation paths. He sat on his bed, his night bat fluttering restlessly above his head. But everything changed. Now it works on a merit system. You have to prove your worth investing in. Lu grimaced. Basic support is miserable, barely enough for decent beasts to reach bronze rank with great effort. 1 measly crystal daily. But I need those materials, Rin insisted. Especially venomous fungi, bronze parts, and runes with... Runes? Lu let out a dry laugh. Those are extremely expensive. They only give them to elite beasts, ones with real potential, and only for passing from silver to gold. The rest have to earn them with results. He looked at the mushrooms in Ren's hair. No offense, but nobody's going to waste resources like that on a spore. Why not? Because experiments with fungi always fail. Always. The school keeps records of every attempt. The best result was a mature fungus that gave a 20% strength increase. And it cost more resources than evolving 3 normal beasts to silver. Rin clenched his fists. If Lu knew what he knew now, if he could explain the true evolution paths. But there are other ways to get resources, Lu murmured. There's the teaching unit system, he continued. If you manage to pass all 5 units this semester, they'll promote you from Iron to Bronze 1. Instead of 1 crystal daily, you'd receive 10. 10 times more. Ren's eyes widened. At Silver 1 it would be 100. Lou gave a dry laugh. But that's not until 4th semester, and only if you pass the first 3 without failing any units. He looked at the mushrooms in Ren's hair. Though honestly, I doubt you'll achieve much in the battle unit. And cultivation. He shook his head. What happens if I fail? Every 3 failed units you lose a point. If you lose 3 points. Lou made a cutting gesture with his hand. Goodbye to all support. The most you can do is try to pass 3 units and avoid getting expelled from the system. Ren nodded slowly, processing the information. The system was brutal, but the rewards... Listen, Lou leaned forward. I'm telling you this because I like you and honestly feel a bit sorry for you. Don't get your hopes up. Focus on surviving the 8 years. Learn what you can, but don't expect miracles. If I were you, Lou lowered his voice, I'd focus on recovering part of what tuition cost. The fees are high, but with enough work in the gathering zones, you could get them to double your resources and recover at least a 5th part in the next 8 years. Double? How does that work? Ren asked. If I were you, Lou lowered his voice, I'd focus on recovering part of what our tuition cost. The fees are high, but with enough work in the gathering zones, you could get them to double your resources and recover at least a 5th part in the next 8 years. Double? How does that work? Ren asked. Tomorrow they'll come to check our belongings. Ren visibly tensed. Relax. Lou smiled at his reaction. It's not what you think. They'll just register the value of the stuff you brought with you. What? For what you just asked about. The Academy doubles the value of everything you get on your own in designated zones, Lou explained. It's through a government subsidy system. The mushrooms in Ren's hair glowed with renewed interest. Everything I get. Everything you obtain with your own hands, yes. Things from your parents or inherited wealth don't count. Only what you gather or process here yourself. It's like a performance scholarship. The better collector you are, the more support you receive. The king has always incentivized people who go out to gather stuff. So if I find valuable materials, the Academy matches their value, Lou confirmed. That's why they record what you bring at the start, to know what you obtained afterward on your own. Lou lay back on his bed, his bat fluttering restlessly. But like I said, don't get your hopes up with that creature, he murmured. The mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed softly, as if responding to his growing determination. What if you're wrong? He asked. What if there's more to spores than everyone believes? Lou looked at him for a long moment. Then, he said finally, you'll have to find a way to prove it. But I warn you, the Academy doesn't waste resources on empty hopes and promises. They aren't empty promises, thought Run. I just need a chance to prove it. And as that thought took shape, the mushrooms in his hair pulsed again, reminding him of the secret that lay beneath their feet. Perhaps there was a way to achieve both things, obtain the materials he needed, and secure his place in the Academy. Did you hear that? Min flopped onto his bed, his water snake materializing like a blue ribbon around his neck. The double what we find and 100 crystals daily at Silver. With that I could. Don't get your hopes up, Taro muttered. First you have to get there. Oh, come on. Min smiled, turning toward Taro, who was quietly organizing his things. Don't tell me you haven't dreamed about it. Imagine what you could do with your beetle in the mines. Taro just mumbled something inaudible and continued meticulously arranging his tools. Min has a point, Ren intervened, noticing how Taro's shoulders tensed whenever someone mentioned his beast. Even beasts that everyone thinks are weak could. Exactly. Min sat up suddenly, his snake undulating with enthusiasm. My water snake is iron rank, but I can study a ton and break the mold like the director said. The point is we all have a chance, right? He got up and walked to Taro, putting an arm around his shoulders. Even Mr. Silent here. His digger beetle will be the sensation when it evolves, right, Taro? Taro blushed slightly, but a small smile appeared on his lips. If it evolves, he murmured, but there was a touch of hope in his voice. Of course it will. Min turned to Run. And your spore, well, at least it glows pretty. Min, Lou sighed from his bed, Stop bothering everyone and finish unpacking. Tomorrow's the belongings check, and your area looks like a disaster zone. It's an organized disaster. Min protested, but started tidying anyway, his snake helping move things with its tail. Taro returned to his silent organizing, but Rin noticed his movements were more relaxed now. Min's enthusiasm seemed to have that effect on people. The mushrooms in Rin's hair glowed softly as he watched his roommates. Maybe the gray wing was perfect for him after all. That night, while his roommates slept, Rin reviewed his options in the darkness, the mushrooms in his hair providing a faint glow, dim to avoid disturbing his companions. Getting materials on his own would be difficult, even knowing exactly what he needed. If they were as expensive as Lou said, obtaining them without academy support could take years. And meanwhile, he murmured to himself, my parents will continue with the ritual day after day, get their runes first, and then. No, he needed to be more efficient. The academy had a merit system, and though everyone expected him to fail, that could play to his advantage. Nobody expected anything from a spore, so any progress, however small, would draw attention. If he could demonstrate even a fraction of his spore's potential, if he could win even moderate academy support with the systems Lou mentioned. Limited resources are better than no resources, he whispered, remembering how his father always said that in the kitchen, even leftovers could become a feast if you knew how to use them. He would have to do both, meet the academy's expectations to gain some support, while searching on his own for the rest of what he needed and doubling it. It would be slower than having full access to resources, but faster than trying to do everything alone. The mushrooms pulsed softly, and Rin felt again that strange resonance with something under the dormitory. One step at a time, he reminded himself. First, prove this student is worth at least the support. Tomorrow will be the first classes. His first chance to show that the rotting boy might not be as useless as everyone thought. He closed his eyes, but his mind kept working, plotting plans, calculating possibilities. 8 years was a long time, if you knew exactly what to do with each day. The classroom was circular, with seats arranged in ascending levels. Rin found himself in the same group as the tiger boy Jean and his friends, who shot threatening glances at him from a distance. Fortunately, Taro, one of his roommates, was also there, though he had arrived late and sat on the other side of the classroom as there was no other place. Luna was there too, her shadow wolf barely visible as an ethereal silhouette beside her. In this first semester, announced Professor Wei, a robust man with a silver rank 2 manticore manifesting in silver patterns across his skin, student groups are random. Afterward, you'll be reorganized according to your performance. So pay attention if you don't want to lose your place. I'll begin a class. Rin observed the patterns on the professor's skin. The manticore had been cultivated primarily with random daylight. There were details suggesting other and used techniques. Wei began drawing a diagram on the board. The basic principles of cultivation have been studied for hundreds of years, Professor Wei began. Every successful method follows 3 fundamental phases and has a proven maximum duration. He drew 3 circles on the board. First, mana absorption. The beast must receive energy appropriate to its nature. Second, processing, how that energy is transformed in the crystal so the mana is suitable. And finally, fixation, how that power is stabilized and made permanent. Wei made a significant pause. Something crucial you must understand. No effective cultivation method lasts more than 6 months. This is a fact proven through countless studies. The most common methods last 150 days, and although some charlatans propose longer processes, the evidence is clear. After 6 months, any cultivation attempt becomes inefficient or downright useless. Rin shifted uneasily in his seat. He knew why this perception was also wrong. All methods without exception were 100 days, but Luna Starweaver, Wei pointed. Could you explain how these phases apply in practice? In practice, Luna stood, her shadow wolf manifesting in her like a dark silhouette with its own life. First, we must obtain the appropriate mana crystals. These are processed, in the case of shadow beasts like mine, under moonlight. Then they're sealed with specific techniques before the beast can absorb them. Correct, Wei nodded. The type of crystal, the processing method, in your case moonlight, and the sealing determine the final effectiveness when the beast absorbs it and lead it to the correct path of its potential. Excuse me, Professor. Rin couldn't contain himself. But that's not entirely accurate. About crystal processing. Silence fell like a slap. Even the tiger boy seemed to forget his hostility, too surprised by the rotting boy's audacity. Oh, Wei turned slowly and looked at him with evident annoyance. The student with the spore has something to contribute about cultivation. Contain laughter. Mana crystals must be processed differently than broad cases like moonlight. They need to be more specific. For example, Luna's wolf crystals shouldn't just be at night, but on a night with 7 moons. Another example would be your manticore, which could have benefited from crystals processed under the first light of dawn. It would have reached silver 3 instead of... Enough! Wei cut him off. I see we have another expert who thinks he knows more than generations of research. Young man, I studied for 30 years before cultivating this manticore. We reached silver rank 2 following methods proven by generations. To suggest that, Wei straightened, his golden patterns glowing with irritation. 5 points less for the student. What's your name? Rin Patender, sir. More laughter, now open. Not that it matters much. Wei smiled maliciously. I doubt a spore will obtain many resources from the academy anyway. But, enough. Wei cut him off again. I understand some students try to compensate for their limitations with extravagant theories. But in this class, we'll stick to proven methods. The texts have been proven by generations. Wei frowned. To suggest they're wrong based on what exactly? Readings and a story? Laughter filled the classroom. The tiger boy and his friends practically glowed with satisfaction. Luna, however, watched the scene with intense interest. Rin clenched his fists under his desk. Not only had he lost points he didn't even have yet, he could lose the opportunity to gain the support he so desperately needed. Reaching 100 points in this class by the end of the semester would now be a bit more difficult. I need a way to prove I'm right, he thought while the mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly. Something irrefutable. Something not even Professor Wei can deny. The answer had to be somewhere, and he had to find it before his opportunity to obtain resources vanished completely. Rin sank in his seat. He hadn't expected wrong knowledge to be so deeply rooted. How could he prove he was right when everything they knew contradicted the truth? Let's continue. Wei returned to the board. As I was saying, basic cultivation follows simple rules. This was going to be harder than Rin thought. The rest of the class was torture. Every time Wei asked a question, he deliberately ignored Rin's raised hand. When he finally did call on him, it was only to say, "See, this is how you answer with established facts, not absurd theories." As we can see in historical records, Wei continued, pointing to Taro, the digger beetle is a classic example of a beast with mediocre natural limits. None has surpassed bronze rank in the more than 500 years we have of species documentation. Rin saw how Taro's shoulders slumped. His roommate had a ton of books. He seemed to have been studying cultivation methods at home, hoping to find some exception. He had thought about telling him what he knew, but decided to wait until he knew him better. However now, Rin straightened in his seat. This was his opportunity. Rin straightened in his seat. This was his opportunity. His classmate's beetle was perfect, a beast common enough that everyone knew its supposed limit, but with hidden potential that could manifest quickly with the correct method. If he could demonstrate visible results in a few months, he would have more than enough time to achieve it within the semester. Of course, he murmured to himself. First, I'd have to convince the owner to try it. And that was the real challenge. Who would trust the boy with the useless spore? Who would risk their beast cultivation following the rotting boy's advice? Still, did he have another choice? That's not true. Rin stood up. The digger beetle can reach silver rank 3 like any other beast. Laughter erupted. Wei looked at him as if he were a particularly annoying fly. First he questions established methods, and now he contradicts historical records. Another 5 points less, Mr. Patender. The records you mention about beetle cultivation, Rin continued, ignoring the laughter, only have one error, the timing of processing. if we process the crystals following the correct, specific method. More theories about strange, specific timings? The exceptions to such ridiculous theories have never been successfully replicated. Wei smiled disdainfully. According to your expert opinion, what would happen if we follow the documented method but change only that detail? The beetle won't evolve into a greater excavator at bronze, as your texts say. It will become a living tunnel instead. Silence fell in the classroom. Taro looked at Ron with hope and confusion. A very specific prediction. Wei leaned forward. What if we put it to the test? If you're so sure, let's make a real bet. If you're right, I'll give you 1 bronze rank material, whatever you want regardless of cost, and 100 points for my teaching unit in my 2 classes. To give you even more time for your wonderful demonstration, don't even bother coming anymore. Since you're so knowledgeable, you won't need my advice in class. You will thus be able to pass the other classes more easily and obtain bronze 1 support instead of iron. Assuming you pass the exams of all 5 units, of course, but if you're wrong, he smiled maliciously. If you don't demonstrate the exact beetle species you predicted, I get your full tuition and you lose all school support. Professor, Taro intervened, my beetle. It's your decision, of course, Wei continued. But I warn you, following Mr. Pattender's theories, if they stray too far from the common method, only guarantees your beast will end up at mature iron rank. Are you willing to risk your progress for the fantasies of someone who can't even evolve his own spore? Ren looked at Taro, seeing the conflict in his eyes. It was a lot to ask, risking his beast's future on the word of a roommate he barely knew. Don't worry, Taro, we'll follow exactly the documented method, changing only 1 specific moment of processing. It will be at night, as the professor's literature says. Taro thought for a moment, and then nodded. There was no turning back now. I accept the bet, Rin said firmly. If the beetle evolves into anything other than a living tunnel, you win. Wei studied Ron for a moment, as if evaluating whether the boy was really as foolish as he seemed. Deal. As they left the classroom, the Tiger Boys group's laughter echoed through the hallway. Hey, rotting boy, one of them shouted. Are you practicing begging already? You'll need it when you lose your tuition. Taro waited until they were gone before turning to Ron. Hey, he said quietly. I know you were trying to help, but I think this joke went too far. You should talk to Professor Wei and apologize. Maybe if you explain you were just... It wasn't a joke, Ren interrupted, the mushrooms in his hair pulsing softly. I can help you have a better life, Taro. Your beetle has real potential. Look, I appreciate you trying to cheer me up, but my mother got me the books as soon as I invoked this thing. Taro shook his head. The records are clear. In 500 years, no digger beetle has surpassed bronze rank. And now, because of me, you could lose everything. We're only going to change 1 thing, Ren insisted. The rest will be exactly like the documented method. There's not as much risk for me as you think. I have an ace up my sleeve. There's no risk for you. Just play along, okay? Taro hesitated. He had already bought 100 crystals and hadn't yet mixed them with the night essence, waiting to gather the 150 he would need for the complete method. Though I'm lucky it's not a full 180-day method, it's still expensive, he muttered, more to himself than to Ron. And getting 150 crystals is already quite expensive. Those extra 50 crystals will be hard to get within the school. The 100 you have will be more than enough, Rin smiled. We just need to wait for a specific night that's coming in a few days. Taro looked at Ron for a long moment. The mushrooms in his hair glowed with a steady light, as if reflecting the certainty in his words. You know what? Taro finally smiled. I hadn't started the mixture with the night essence anyway. I was waiting to have all the crystals to do it at once. He shrugged. I guess I won't lose anything by trying. If you're wrong, I'll still have time to get the other 50 crystals. After using 100 for 100 days, I'm sure I'll have the rest ready, just in case. You won't need them, Rin smiled. I promise. As they walked to their next class, Rin couldn't help but notice how the mushrooms in his hair pulsed more strongly near certain walls. The ruins beneath the academy were calling, but that would have to wait. First, he had to prove that the rotting boy knew exactly what he was talking about. You won't need them, Rin smiled. I promise. With the 100 crystals you have, it will be more than enough if we overcharge them. The error in the extra 50 days is in the reduced amount of mana in the night crystal. The beetle adapts to the error late, 50 days late. Though I understand why they don't use larger crystals, mana poisoning is scary, but I hope you'll let me slightly increase the amount, Rin smiled. We just need to wait for a specific night that's coming in a few days so they don't absorb the wrong moon's light and the evolution doesn't stray from the correct path. Taro looked at Rin for a long moment. The mushrooms in his hair glowed with a steady light, as if reflecting the certainty in his words. Could he believe this child with such terrible luck? Actually, his logic told him no. But subconsciously, Rin's overwhelming confidence gave him tiny hopes. You know what? Taro finally smiled. I hadn't started the mixture with the night essence anyway. I was waiting to have all the crystals to do it at once, so... He shrugged. I guess I lose nothing by doing it your way. 500 years of records won't change to give my beetle another option if the professor was so sure there wasn't. And if you're wrong about the amount when overcharging the crystal, the school will give me the potion for poisoning once. At least that support is universal. I'm telling you, you won't need any of that. Rin repeated and laughed at Taro's worried monologue. Yes, but if you're wrong, nothing will happen to me anyway. That's why I'm calm. And I'd still have time to collect the other 50 crystals to finish the common method, though we'll have to dig. They'll only give us one iron rank crystal daily, and it's not an earth attribute. Though after using 100 for 100 days, I'm sure I'll already have another 50, just in case. Ha, you talk and worry too much. As they walked to their next class, Rin noticed something. By the way, why didn't you collect rain crystals? They're cheaper, but you could have exchanged them. I had 500 before coming. I even got 15 in the last few weeks thanks to the rains. In the city? Taro laughed without humor. It's almost impossible to find them here. Besides, my beetle needs earth crystals, which are much more expensive. Plant users are lucky they can use that basic and super cheap crystal in their first rank. Rin nodded, thoughtful. He would also need earth crystals for his evolution, though of a higher rank than Taro's. As they walked toward combat class, Rin and Taro met Min in the hallway. Did you hear? Min smiled, his water snake undulating around his neck. Professor Yang has a stone behemoth. A behemoth. There are only 3 in the whole city. Rin, Min, and Taro had reached the end of the hallway to the next class. The combat classroom was different from the others. A circular amphitheater with an arena in the center, surrounded by ascending stands. The walls were marked with scars from past battles. Silence. Professor Yang's voice thundered in the amphitheater. He was a tall, muscular man, with scars that spoke of years of real experience. The stone behemoth in Professor Yang's skin gleamed under the amphitheater lights. The rocky lines covering his muscles made him look carved from living granite, a perfect manifestation for a combat instructor. Welcome to the real reason the government has you in school. Professor Yang smiled. Though before we begin with the important stuff, Yang approached the board. I see in your faces that no one has explained how this school really works. Typical of old way. Since my colleague was probably too busy with theories to explain the basics to you, let me simplify your 5 teaching units. He drew 5 circles on the board. The academy divides its teaching into 5 units. Each is worth 1 point, and you need at least 3 to maintain your support here. Losing 3 points 3 times in a row means you're a failure not worth cultivating. He pointed to the first circle. First, basic knowledge. History, economics, and life. 3 boring but necessary subjects. Without them, you wouldn't even know how to pay your taxes. Several students laughed. Passing all 3 counts as 1 unit. Several students were taking notes frantically. He pointed to the second section. Then there's Professor Wei's theoretical classes, cultivation and crystal processing. Another unit. Yes, they're important, he rolled his eyes, but theory alone won't keep you alive. His tone suggested he considered this barely more useful than the basic classes. The third unit is exterior gathering, where you'll learn something useful. They'll teach you to survive while searching for cultivation materials. 2 weeks every 2 months will go to designated zones. You'll learn to identify materials, detect monsters, and most importantly, when to fight and when to flee. The mushrooms in Ren's hair glowed with interest as Yang continued. Fourth unit, practical crystals. Not endless theories, but real identification and gathering in the caves. Also a respectable unit. You'll learn to distinguish qualities, purity, and most importantly, not to poison yourselves too often by exposing yourself too much to concentrated mana. He straightened. And finally, combat. My specialty is battle against monsters. A young woman entered the classroom, her light step contrasting with Yang's imposing presence. My assistant, Professor Lin, is expert in combat against other tamers. His eyes swept the class. And do you know why this is the most important unit? Because no matter how much theory you memorize, how many crystals you identify, or how many materials you collect, if you can't defend yourself, all that knowledge will die with you. The rock in his skin crackled, as if emphasizing his words. Outside, monsters won't wait for you to process your crystals correctly. And in the rival city, some humans can be just as dangerous. Rin sank a bit in his seat. With only a 10% increase in strength, this unit would be a brutal unit. This class, his voice was rough as the stone covering him, will determine your baseline. He walked to the center of the arena. The final exam is simple. You'll have to eliminate a real monster. Not one of those weak ones that prowl near the city, but a genuine beast from the outer zones. Murmurs filled the amphitheater. That's why I need to know where you stand. Professor Lin and I will design a specific training program for each of you based on your performance today. Professor Lin began unrolling a scroll. We'll pair you according to your beasts and attributes. The goal is to show your current capabilities. Yang nodded. Some of you have strength increases, others speed. Some have beasts with special abilities. But now, before cultivating them, is when your individualities as people can matter more than your beasts. We want to see how you use them, how you think in combat. And one more thing, Yang smiled. In my class, theory is learned through bruises. The mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed nervously. His 10% increase in strength seemed insignificant compared to his classmates' beasts, even in the early stages. First pair, Lin read from the scroll, Jean, and the tiger boy straightened, his eyes fixed on Run, waiting for his opportunity. First pair, Lin read from the scroll, Jean, and the tiger boy straightened, his eyes fixed on Run, waiting for his opportunity like a predator spotting wounded prey. Rin could see the disappointment flash across Jin's face. The tiger boy had been hoping for a different prey. However, as he watched both students descend to the arena, the mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed softly, revealing the patterns of both beasts with startling clarity. Knowledge flowed through his mind like a crystal-clear stream. The spirit tiger versus the digger beetle, it would be an interesting combination for Ren to study. Each beast's strengths and weaknesses became apparent to him, like reading an intricate map of their capabilities. The digger beetle has a natural ability, Ren thought, the information unfolding in his mind. Earth Shield, a mana layer that reinforces the exoskeleton using earth energy. And the tiger, its spirit claws follow a pattern of 5 strikes before needing to recharge energy. The knowledge felt both foreign and familiar, like remembering something he'd always known but never realized. Enter the circle, Yang ordered, his voice echoing in the amphitheater. Show us what you can do. Taro descended nervously into the arena, his digger beetle fusing with him and manifesting as a brown exoskeleton that covered his skin like living armor. Jean followed with a predatory smile, tiger markings becoming more pronounced on his face, his movements fluid and confident. Begin. Jean attacked immediately, his movements flowing like water. Taro instinctively activated his earth shield, his exoskeleton glowing with a deep brown hue. Jin's fists, enhanced by the spirit tiger's 30% strength bonus, hammered against Taro's exoskeleton. The impacts resonated through the amphitheater like war drums, but barely left marks on the beetle's defense. Not bad. Jean smiled, backing away with predatory grace. But how about this? His eyes blazed with golden light as the spirit tiger manifested its fangs, covering Jin's fists with ethereal energy that seemed to bend the very air around them. Spiritual Fong, Rin murmured, recognizing the tiger's basic technique, seeing the intricate patterns of mana that made it possible. The next blow partially penetrated Taro's defenses, drawing a cry of pain that echoed in the arena. The spiritual energy had found a weakness in the physical armor, exploiting it with cruel efficiency. "What's wrong, cockroach? Only know how to hide." The exoskeleton had held, but the spirit energy had penetrated like water through stone. Each new blow seemed to find another crack in the seemingly impervious defense. "Counterattack," Yang shouted from the sidelines, his voice carrying an annoyed tone. "The best defense is worthless if you never strike back." But Taro only retreated, protecting himself with his arms in an increasingly desperate defense. Each new spiritual Fong found a different weak point in his armor, like a predator testing its prey's defenses. "The problem isn't the defense," Rin observed, seeing the pattern with perfect clarity. "It's that Taro isn't using the shield's rebound to counterattack. Each time he absorbs a blow, he could." After the fifth spirit strike, Jin had to pull back momentarily to recharge. It was just an instant, but Rin saw the opportunity Taro was missing, a perfect moment for a counterattack that never came. The fight continued with the same pattern until the Earth shield finally gave way before a last spiritual Fong, cracking like ancient pottery under too much pressure. Pathetic, Jin taunted between blows, his confidence growing with each successful strike. "Is this the level of the rotting boy's friends? I guess trash attracts trash." The fight ended shortly after, with Taro on the ground and Jin barely winded, his tiger markings still glowing with unused power. "Enough," Yang declared, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Jin, good attack rhythm, though you need to manage your spirit energy better. Taro, your earth shield is solid, but you wasted every counterattack opportunity. Perfect defense is useless if you don't learn to turn it into offense. In a real fight, passivity will kill you." "A win is a win." Jin smiled as he climbed the stands, satisfaction radiating from every movement. As he passed by Run, he added in a low voice, "Tell your friend to find better company next time. Though I guess cockroaches understand each other, but practicing with a rotting boy will only make him weaker." Rin clenched his fists, the mushrooms in his hair pulsing softly. He could see clearly now the spirit tiger's attack patterns, its limitations, its weak points. But that knowledge would have to wait for a different time to be used. The matches continued, each pair showcasing different styles and abilities. Min used his water snake with surprising creativity, though he lost to a boy with an earth bear. "Run," Lin finally called, though she winced at the pairing she read. Rin stood up, acutely aware of every eye in the amphitheater turning to him. Against Kai, the boy with green scales smiled predatorily, his scales gleaming under the lights as he stood. It was the same one who had tripped him earlier, his confidence evident in every movement. The rotting boy against Kai. Jin laughed from his seat, voice dripping with mockery. "What a waste. I could have crushed him faster." "On the contrary," interrupted Cass, the eagle girl, her eyes sharp with interest. "Kai's stone scales are perfect for this. I want to see how the rotting one handles an opponent practically immune to his level of strength." Rin swallowed hard. The stone scales granted natural protection. His blows, even with the 10% increase, would barely be mosquito bites against such defense. As he descended toward the arena, the mushrooms in his hair pulsed with knowledge. The scales had a specific pattern, zones where the protection was weaker. But even so, "Scared, rotting boy?" Kai flexed his arms covered in green scales, each one catching the light like polished jade. "You should be. This wouldn't be a normal fight. It would be a demonstration of just how useless the weakest beast really was against a proper defense. Or at least, that's what everyone expected to see." Whispers about the unfairness and how easy it would be for Kai began to circulate through the stands. "It's not fair," someone complained through laughter. "It won't even be fun to watch." "What did you expect?" someone murmured. "With that pathetic 10% increase." His mushrooms could glow brighter, suggested another, prompting more laughter. The pairings were random, Lin announced firmly. So I don't want to hear anyone complaining about favoritism. Professor Yang nodded, the stone lines in his skin gleaming. Though with some, his gaze lingered on Run. It doesn't really matter who they fight. The laughter was immediate and cruel. Finish him quickly, Kai, Jean shouted from the stands. So we can move on to the real fights. Yang watched with bored indifference. It was obvious he considered this a waste of time. What could the weakest beast do against stone scales? And he knew a lot about stone defense. Lin, on the other hand, seemed a bit more interested. The mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed as he analyzed Kai's scales, seeking any pattern, any weakness he could exploit. Begin, Yang ordered. Begin, Yang ordered. Kai launched forward, confident. Why wouldn't he be? His stone lizard scales not only increased his resistance and protected him, but his beast also enhanced his other attributes, including strength by 20%. Ren dodged the first blow, but not through skill. Despite Kai being faster, knowledge showed him how the scales limited certain movements. Kai couldn't raise his right arm beyond a certain angle without exposing a weak point between his ribs. Stop running, rotting boy. The scales on your right arm, Ren spoke while backing away. Doesn't it bother you how they limit your movement? Kai stopped for a fraction of a second, surprised. That moment of doubt cost him. His next blow was slower, more self-conscious. Shut up. It's because of the growth pattern, Ren continued, dodging another blow. Scales from other beasts follow the natural muscle line. But in your case, I said shut up. Kai attacked with more force, but now his movements were less fluid. The doubt had been planted. He was thinking about his own scales, about the small rigidities he had always ignored. The mushrooms glowed more intensely. The knowledge showed more. How the green scales indicated a minor deviation in cultivation, how this affected their distribution. Your scales should be almost blue. Ren dodged another blow. The green means they absorb too much earth mana. That's why they're denser on your right side. You know nothing. Kai roared, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. In the stands, silence had replaced laughter. Even Yang was watching more intently. Excess earth mana makes the scales grow irregularly, Ren continued while moving. It's subtle, but your right side is heavier. That's why you always turn left when you attack. The next time Kai attacked, everyone could see it, the slight imbalance in his turn, the way he unconsciously compensated for the extra weight on his right side. Shut up. Rage made Kai commit the mistake Ren was waiting for. He lunged forward with all his might, turning left as he always did. Ren didn't dodge this time. At the last moment, when Kai was fully committed to his attack, Ren stepped forward. His hands found Kai's arm at the exact angle where the scales couldn't protect the joint. A precise pull, using Kai's own weight. The scaled boy fell heavily to the ground. Impossible. Jean rose from his seat. How could the rotting boy? The whispers and laughter that had accompanied the fight's beginning had transformed into tense silence. No one expected the mushroom boy to even touch Kai, much less throw him down. Humiliation was reflected in the faces of those who moments before had been mocking him, especially in Jin's group. Kai rose slowly, his green scales gleaming with a threatening glow. The amusement had vanished from his face, replaced by cold fury. One thing was playing with the rotting boy, but being thrown down by him in front of the whole class. The atmosphere in the amphitheater had changed. It was no longer a comic spectacle. Now there was real tension. Even Professor Yang had leaned forward in his seat, his expression of boredom replaced by genuine interest. Lin and Luna showing even more interest. The way Kai clenched his fists, how the scales on his neck bristled. Everyone could see the game was over. The rotting boy had made the mistake of humiliating him, and now he would pay for it. Damn you! Kai stood up, his scales glowing more intensely. Speed mode. The scales on his legs changed pattern, channeling more mana. Suddenly, Kai was 50% faster. The next minute was a nightmare for Ren. Kai's first blow was brutal. Ren could barely raise his arms to block, and even then the impact made him stumble back several steps. Is that all? Kai smiled, advancing. The great beast expert can't even stay standing. Trying to dodge the next blow was useless. Kai was now much faster. The scales on his legs gleamed as he moved, and this time the impact connected directly with Ren's stomach. The air left his lungs. The mushrooms in his hair flickered erratically as he fell to his knees. "Get up, rotting boy," Jean shouted from the stands. "The fun's just starting." Ren stood up slowly, knowledge flowing through the pain. Another blow caught him, this time in the shoulder. Kai was relentless. Each impact resonated in his bones, each blow finding a new point of pain. "Stop the fight," Taro shouted. "He'll kill him." But the mushrooms in Ren's hair glowed more intensely with each blow. The knowledge flowed faster now. Speed mode diverted mana to the legs, leaving other points exposed. Yang stepped forward. "This is enough." "Wait." Lin stopped him, her eyes fixed on Ren. "Your scales," Ren spat a bit of blood and saliva, "are absorbing the wrong type of mana. Learn to shut up, damn it. That's why speed mode destabilizes you." Kai stopped for an instant, his green scales glowing erratically. "The scales should be blue," Ren continued, barely staying on his feet. "The faster you move. Please shut up or—" Kai lunged forward with all his enhanced speed, his scales gleaming like a green star. "Ren!" Taro shouted. But again, Ren didn't dodge. At the last second, Ren stepped to the left. His fist, guided by precise knowledge, found the exact point where the mana lines crossed incorrectly. It wasn't a powerful blow. The 10% increase barely made him stronger than a normal child. But it didn't need to be. Kai's scales, overcharged with the wrong mana and strained to the maximum by speed mode, resonated with the impact. The energy pattern, already unstable, collapsed. All the green scales went dark at once. Kai fell to the ground, gasping. His scales, now matte and lusterless, looked like mere patches on his skin. The silence in the amphitheater was absolute. "Impossible." Yang stepped forward. "Stone scales with a simple speed mode." Ren staggered, barely conscious, forces too much mana through the wrong pattern. One hit in the precise point, and he couldn't finish. His knees gave way and the world went black. The last thing he heard was Professor Yang's voice. "Take Patender to the infirmary." Ren woke up in the infirmary. The pain in his body reminded him of each of Kai's blows. The mushrooms in his hair glowed erratically. Finally awake, Professor Lin was sitting beside his bed, a mischievous smile on her lips as she sipped tea. "You know, it's the first time I've seen someone win a fight while looking so adorably pathetic," she laughed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Your form is terrible, darling. Your endurance." She clicked her tongue. "Well, let's say any novice with any other beast would have more stamina. And your technique." She shook her head. "Practically non-existent." Ren tried to sit up, every muscle protesting. Lin gently pushed him back to the bed. "Boys who let themselves be used as training dummies need to rest a bit while listening." "I didn't let." "No." She arched an eyebrow, amused. "Oh, sorry. I suppose your face and body heroically stopped all those blows on purpose." Despite the pain, Ren couldn't help blushing. "But," Lin leaned forward, her smile becoming softer, "your combat reading was fascinating. The way you analyzed Kai's scales, how you found the weak point in his mana pattern. That was extraordinary. Why are you here, Professor? Can I visit my new favorite student?" "You're what?" "I want to train you personally." Ren blinked, sure he had heard wrong. "Train me?" "But—" He looked at the mushrooms in his hair reflected in the window. "I have the weakest beast. Even if I improve my technique, my limit is—" And Lin smiled, but there was something bitter in her expression. "Let me show you something." Lin rolled up her sleeve with a theatrical flourish. "Look at this." On her arm, white and red feathers gleamed under the light. A swift crane manifested in her skin, its wings forming elegant patterns that ran up to her shoulder. A swift crane, Ren observed, the mushrooms in his hair pulsing with knowledge. But the feather pattern. Lin traced the feathers with a finger. Most cranes can reach silver easily. They're creatures naturally gifted for cultivation, with a clear path to higher ranks. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes lost in the feather patterns. Mine was especially promising thanks to my family's resources. The professor said it had potential for silver too, maybe even, well, pretty impressive, right? Or it was, until this fool, she pointed to herself, ruined her cultivation through impatience. The mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed as he analyzed. The pattern clearly showed where the cultivation had deviated. Now, it's permanently at bronze, one having reached maturity, Lin continued, pinching Ren's cheek. So let's say I have a weakness for special cases. Why me? Because she leaned in so close their noses almost touched. I saw a little genius today. Sure, a genius who desperately needs physical training, but she winked. That could be fixed. Ren saw a flash of pity in her eyes, though she hid it well behind her playful attitude. And she was right. Even a mature beast, ruined at Bronze 1, was infinitely superior to his spore, at least in others' perception, since he knew the truth. However, Ren could certainly use some extra training. So what do you say? Lin ruffled his hair, making the mushrooms glow. Will you let this ruined assistant professor train the weakest student? The mushrooms glowed as Run considered her offer. The knowledge showed him that Lin's swift crane could have been extraordinary and that it wasn't completely lost yet. I accept, he said finally. But, Lin tilted her head, curious. Someday, Rin looked at the feathers on her arm. I'd like to talk to you about your crane's cultivation. Lin blinked, surprised, before letting out a crystalline laugh. How daring! She pinched both his cheeks this time. The little expert wants to fix my cultivation? One thing at a time, darling. First, her smile turned mischievous. Let's see if you can last more than 2 minutes in a real fight. The teacher stood up. Well, enough rest. Lin pulled a small green pill from her pocket. Take this. It will help with the pain and speed up your recovery. Rin swallowed the pill, feeling a pleasant warmth spread through his body. The pain didn't disappear completely, but it became more manageable. Now to class. Lin helped him up. You have practical economics after battle class, and you can't afford to miss it. With your special condition, you need to excel in all theoretical units if you want to maintain your support. Rin nodded, understanding where the advice came from. Lin believed that with his spore, he would need every point he could get. I'll see you after classes. Lin smiled as she gently pushed him toward the door. And this time, try not to provoke anyone who might break your bones before you heal. Okay? The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly as Rin headed to his next class. The lingering pain reminded him that, despite his victory, he still had a long way to go. Rin arrived, limping, to the economics classroom. Professor May was already in the middle of her explanation. That's why understanding crystal economy cycles is crucial, she was saying while drawing graphs on the board. The value fluctuates according to the season. Rain crystals, for example, are cheaper during the wet season. Taro waved to him from his seat, pointing to an empty space beside him. Smart merchants, May continued, buy when prices are low and store. But they must consider storage costs and degradation risk. Mr. Patender, May stopped, her voice sharp. Is punctuality not important for? Professor, Luna interrupted from her seat, her voice cold and precise.